The ground split open beneath Ethan Walker's feet at 8:47 a.m., and in that moment, he had to choose: save a stranger's life or save his own future. What he didn't know was that the woman trapped under concrete wasn't just any stranger. She was the person who held his destiny in her hands. This is the story of one father's impossible choice and how a single act of courage changed everything. Stay with me until the end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The morning had started with promise, the kind that made Ethan Walker's chest tight with hope and fear in equal measure. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror at 6:30 a.m., his hands trembling slightly as he knotted his tie, the only tie he owned, navy blue with a subtle silver stripe, purchased 3 years ago for his wife's funeral. His reflection stared back at him, a man of 34 who looked 40, with exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes and gray threading through his dark hair at the temples. "Daddy, you look fancy!" Noah's voice rang out from the doorway, his 7-year-old son still in his dinosaur pajamas, clutching the stuffed elephant that had been his companion since birth. Ethan turned, forcing brightness into his smile. "Yeah? Think I'll impress them, buddy?" Noah nodded solemnly, his small face serious in that way children have when they understand more than adults give them credit for. "Mom would say you look handsome." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow, stealing his breath for just a moment. 3 years. 3 years since Sarah had died, since that drunk driver had torn through a red light and torn their world apart. 3 years of being both mother and father, of splitting himself in two and still never feeling like enough. "She would," Ethan agreed softly, crouching down to his son's level. "And you know what else she'd say?" "What?" "She'd say that no matter what happens today, we're going to be okay. Because we've got each other." Noah wrapped his small arms around Ethan's neck, and for a moment they just held each other in the doorway of their cramped apartment. A 2-bedroom walk-up in the Tenderloin where the walls were paper-thin and the heat only worked half the time. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. The interview was at 9 a.m. sharp, Montgomery Corporation, one of the largest engineering firms on the West Coast. Senior project manager position. Salary that would more than double what Ethan made at his current job, where he spent 60 hours a week designing HVAC systems for strip malls and getting paid for 40. Benefits. Security. The kind of job that meant Noah could have music lessons instead of humming along to YouTube videos. The kind of job that meant they could move out of this neighborhood where Ethan couldn't let his son play outside alone. It had taken 6 months to even get this interview. 6 months of sending applications into the void, of hearing nothing back or getting automated rejection emails. When the call had finally come 3 weeks ago, Ethan had actually wept, quietly, in the bathroom after Noah had gone to bed, his face pressed into a towel so his son wouldn't hear. "Mrs. Chen is coming at 7:30, Ethan said, standing up and checking his watch. "Remember the rules?" Noah recited them dutifully. "No opening the door for anyone else. If there's an emergency, call 911 first, then Mrs. Chen. Stay inside, don't use the stove." "Good man." Ethan ruffled his son's hair. "I should be back by 11. Mrs. Chen will make you breakfast, and then you've got that science project to work on, right?" Noah's face lit up. "My robot! Daddy, come see what I added." They walked together to Noah's room, which was barely big enough for a twin bed and a small desk. But Noah had transformed it into a workshop of childhood imagination: cardboard boxes covered in aluminum foil, toilet paper tubes, bottle caps, all assembled into an elaborate robot that stood nearly 2 feet tall. "See? I gave him grabber arms." Noah demonstrated how 2 sections of cardboard, connected with brass fasteners, could open and close like claws. "So he can help people who drop things." Ethan felt something crack open in his chest. His son, building a robot to help people. Despite everything, despite losing his mother, despite their struggles, despite living in a neighborhood where sirens were the nightly lullaby, Noah still believed in helping others. "It's perfect, buddy. You're going to win that science fair for sure." "Do you really think so?" "I know so. You're the smartest kid I know." Noah beamed, and Ethan committed the image to memory, his son's joy, pure and uncomplicated. This interview wasn't just about money or security. It was about giving Noah a childhood where he could keep that light in his eyes. At 7:15, Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from his current boss, Jerry. Walker, need you to check those plans before you send them. Found an error in the calculations. Ethan's stomach dropped. He'd spent 3 late nights on those plans, checking and rechecking every measurement, every load-bearing calculation. But Jerry always found something, always had one more revision, one more impossible deadline. It was part of why Ethan was so desperate to leave. He typed back, "In the middle of something. We'll check this afternoon." The response was immediate. "Not acceptable. Client presentation is at noon. Fix it now." Ethan stared at the screen, his jaw clenching. Jerry knew about the interview. Ethan had requested the time off 2 weeks ago, had even offered to work through the weekend to make up for it. But Jerry had a talent for creating crises that somehow always seemed to land on the days when Ethan needed to be somewhere else. "Daddy, you okay?" Ethan looked up to find Noah watching him with those 2 knowing eyes. He forced his expression to relax. "Yeah, buddy, just work stuff, nothing important." He silenced his phone and slipped it into his pocket. Not today. Today, nothing was going to stop him from making this interview. Not Jerry, not guilt, not the universe itself, Mrs. Chen arrived at 7:30, a grandmother in her 60s who lived 2 doors down and watched Noah for $20, and whatever leftovers were in the fridge. She was kind in that no-nonsense way, and Noah adored her. "You look very professional, Mr. Walker," she said approvingly, taking in his suit. "This is the big interview, yes?" "This is it," Ethan confirmed, trying not to let his anxiety show. "I should be back by 11 at the latest." "Take your time. Noah and I will be fine. Won't we, Noah?" Noah nodded, though Ethan could see the slight tightness around his son's eyes. Noah never said it out loud, but Ethan knew he worried every time his father left. Worried that one day, like Mom, Dad might not come back. Ethan knelt down one more time, taking Noah's small hands in his. "Hey, look at me. I'm coming back, I promise, okay?" "Okay," Noah whispered. "I love you, buddy." "Love you too, Daddy." The words felt like an anchor and a lifeline all at once. Ethan stood, nodded to Mrs. Chen, and walked out into the San Francisco morning. The city was already awake, the streets filling with the morning rush. Ethan had given himself 45 minutes to make what should have been a 20-minute trip. He'd learned long ago to account for delays, for buses that didn't show, for unexpected detours. The Montgomery Corporation building was downtown, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that spoke of success and permanence. He took the bus, standing near the back and watching the city roll past. San Francisco, beautiful and brutal in equal measure. A place where fortunes were made overnight and dreams died just as quickly. Where tech billionaires bought penthouses while families slept in cars. Ethan had grown up here, back when the city still had room for regular people, before the tech boom had transformed it into something both magnificent and monstrous. His phone buzzed again. Jerry, calling now. Ethan sent it to voicemail. Then another text. "This is insubordination, Walker. We'll be having a serious conversation about your future here." The irony almost made Ethan laugh. His future there, as if he had one, grinding away 60-hour weeks for poverty wages while Jerry took credit for his designs, as if staying there was anything but a slow death of ambition and hope. He typed back, "We'll call you after my appointment. No apology, no explanation, just a simple statement." It felt like a tiny rebellion, and Ethan was surprised by how good it felt. The bus lurched to a stop at Market Street. Ethan checked his watch, 8:32. Plenty of time. The Montgomery building was just 4 blocks from here. He could even stop for coffee, maybe calm the nervous energy that was making his hands shake. He stepped off the bus into the morning sun, adjusting his tie, checking his reflection in a store window. He looked professional, put together, like the kind of man who deserved a 6-figure salary and a corner office, like the kind of father who could give his son everything he needed. The street was crowded with morning commuters, everyone moving with that purposeful San Francisco stride. Ethan joined the flow, his mind already rehearsing his interview answers. "Why do you want to work for Montgomery Corporation?" "Because I want to build things that matter. Because I want to be part of something bigger than strip mall HVAC systems. Because I'm tired of watching my son eat ramen 3 nights a week." He was 2 blocks from the Montgomery building when it happened. It started as a sound, a deep bass rumble that Ethan felt in his bones before he heard it. The kind of sound that shouldn't exist, that spoke of the earth itself moving in ways it wasn't meant to. People around him paused, looking up, looking around. That brief moment of confusion before understanding. Then the world began to shake. Ethan had lived through earthquakes before. Small ones, mostly, the kind that rattled dishes and made chandeliers swing but didn't really do damage. California's constant reminder that the ground beneath your feet was never as solid as you wanted to believe. This wasn't that. This was the earth coming apart. The pavement rippled like water, throwing Ethan sideways into a lamppost. He grabbed it, holding on as the world went insane around him. The rumbling became a roar, drowning out the screams that were starting to rise from every direction. Car alarms shrieked. Glass exploded from windows above, raining down in glittering shards. A fissure opened in the street itself, zigzagging across the concrete like lightning frozen in stone. Later, scientists would say it lasted 47 seconds. But in that moment, time fractured and stretched. 47 seconds that felt like hours, like days, like forever. When it finally stopped, the silence was almost worse than the noise. That heavy, shocked silence that comes when people's minds haven't caught up to what their bodies have just experienced. Then, like a switch flipping, the silence broke into chaos. Sirens, crying, shouting, the hiss of broken gas lines, and the crackling of small fires. Ethan stood on shaking legs, his hand still gripping the lamppost. He was alive, unhurt, except for a scrape on his palm where he'd grabbed the metal. Around him, the street looked like a war zone. Cars were crumpled against each other. A storefront had collapsed, its bricks spilling out onto the sidewalk. People were stumbling, bleeding, helping each other. And then Ethan heard it. "Help! Please! Someone help me!" The voice came from his left. Ethan turned and saw what was left of a building facade. An old brick structure, maybe 5 stories tall, that had partially collapsed. The ground floor was a tumble of brick and concrete and twisted metal. And trapped beneath it, visible only as an arm reaching out from under the rubble, was a person. A woman. Her hand was stretching toward the sky, fingers splayed in desperation. "Help me, please! I can't move my legs!" Ethan looked at his watch. The crystal was cracked, but it still worked. 8:47. He had 13 minutes to make his interview. The Montgomery building was just 2 blocks away. 2 blocks through chaos and destruction, yes, but he could make it. He could run, could climb over debris, could get there and explain what had happened. They'd understand, wouldn't they? An earthquake, a natural disaster. They'd have to reschedule. But as he stood there, frozen between 2 futures, he heard his son's voice in his head. "Mom would say you look handsome." And Sarah's voice, from a memory 3 years old, standing in the kitchen of their old apartment. "You know what I love about you, Ethan? You can't walk past someone who needs help. It's like you're physically incapable of it." He'd laughed then, protesting. But she'd been right. She'd always been right. Ethan looked at the hand reaching out from under the rubble, then at his watch, then back at the hand. There wasn't really a choice. His legs were moving before his brain fully committed, carrying him across the debris-strewn street toward the collapsed building. Other people were running away from it, afraid of aftershocks, of further collapse. Ethan ran toward it. "I'm coming," he called out. "Hold on, I'm coming. Please." The woman's voice was weakening, panic giving way to shock. "Please, I can't feel my legs. There's so much blood." Ethan reached the edge of the rubble and saw her clearly for the first time. Her arm was extended through a gap in the concrete, her hand covered in dust and blood. He couldn't see her face, couldn't see most of her body. She was buried under what looked like half a wall. "My name's Ethan," he said, trying to keep his voice calm, even as his heart hammered against his ribs. "I'm going to get you out. Can you tell me your name?" "Claire." The word came out as a gasp. "My name is Claire." "Okay, Claire. I need you to stay calm. Can you move at all?" "My arms. Just my arms. My legs. Oh God, my legs. Don't think about that right now. Just focus on me, okay? Focus on my voice." Ethan began pulling at the rubble, tossing aside smaller pieces of brick and concrete, but the main section pinning her was massive, a slab of wall that must have weighed hundreds of pounds. Rebar jutted out from it at twisted angles. He could see now that it had Claire pinned from roughly the waist down. "How bad is the bleeding?" he asked, still working, his hands already torn and scraped. I can't see. It feels wet. Everything feels wet." That wasn't good. Ethan looked around desperately. A few other people were nearby, pulling survivors from the rubble, but everyone was focused on their own emergencies. In the distance, he could hear sirens, but they sounded far away, and there were probably hundreds of calls for help across the city right now. He looked at his watch again. 8:51. 9 minutes. Ethan pulled off his jacket and threw it aside. Then his tie. The only tie he owned, the one he'd worn to Sarah's funeral. He looked at it for just a moment, this strip of fabric that had marked every important day in his life for the past 3 years. Then he began tearing it into strips. "Claire, I need you to stay with me. Talk to me. Tell me about yourself." "What do you do?" I work in engineering, project management." Her voice was getting thready, weak. I was going to an interview this morning." Ethan's hands froze for just a second. An interview this morning. He shook his head, forced himself to keep working. The universe and its jokes. "Yeah, what kind of projects?" "Sustainable design, green buildings. Oh God, it hurts." I know it does. "You're doing great, Claire. You're incredibly brave." He'd torn the tie into 3 strips now. Tourniquets. He had to get to her legs, had to stop the bleeding she could feel but couldn't see. But first, he had to move the concrete slab. Ethan looked around and spotted what he needed. A length of metal rebar, bent but still intact, and a chunk of concrete that could serve as a fulcrum. He'd taken physics in college, had spent years designing structures that dealt with weight and load and leverage. He could do this. He had to do this. He positioned the concrete chunk as close to the slab as he could get it, then threaded the rebar underneath. A lever. The oldest tool in human history. "Claire, I'm going to try to lift this. When I do, I need you to try to pull yourself out, okay? Use your arms." I don't know if I can." "You can. You will. On 3, okay?" "Okay." Her voice was barely a whisper now. Ethan gripped the rebar, positioned himself, and pulled. The slab shifted slightly, maybe an inch. Not enough. "Come on," he muttered. "Come on." He repositioned, planted his feet, and pulled again. This time with everything he had, every muscle in his back and legs and arms straining. He thought of Noah, of the science fair robot built to help people, of Sarah saying you can't walk past someone who needs help. The slab lifted. 2 inches. 3 inches. "Now, Claire, pull!" He heard her cry out, heard the scrape of fabric and skin against concrete. The slab was impossibly heavy, and he could feel his muscles beginning to shake, to fail. "I can't," Claire gasped. "I'm stuck. Something's—" "Pull!" Ethan roared, his vision starting to blur at the edges. "Pull now!" And then, miracle of miracles, he felt the weight shift, felt Claire move beneath it. The slab crashed back down, but Claire's hand, both her hands now, were free, and she was pulling herself forward, inch by agonizing inch. Ethan dropped the rebar and grabbed her arms, pulling her the rest of the way clear. She came free in a rush, and they both fell backward onto the debris-covered street. For a moment, they just lay there, both breathing hard. Then Ethan's training kicked back in. He sat up and looked at Claire's legs. The sight made his stomach lurch. Her left leg was crushed below the knee, the fabric of her pants soaked through with blood. Her right leg looked intact but was twisted at an angle that wasn't natural. A compound fracture, probably. Maybe worse. "Claire, I need to stop the bleeding. This is going to hurt." She was looking at her legs now, her eyes wide with shock and horror. Oh God, my legs!" "Look at me." Ethan grabbed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Look at me, not at them. You're going to be okay. I promise you're going to be okay." He didn't know if that was true, but he said it anyway. Working quickly, he used the strips of his tie to create tourniquets above the wounds, pulling them tight despite Claire's screams of pain. Then he took off his dress shirt, leaving himself in just his undershirt, and used it to pack the worst of the bleeding. His watch, 8:57. 3 minutes. The interview was gone. There was no making it now. Even if he ran, even if he left Claire here bleeding on the street, he wouldn't make it, and he couldn't leave her. The bleeding was slowing, but she was going into shock, her skin pale and clammy, her breathing shallow. "Stay with me, Claire," he said, taking her hand. Her grip was weak. "Talk to me. Tell me about your green buildings." Sustainable materials," she whispered. "Reduced carbon footprint. Buildings that give back more than they take." "That's beautiful. The world needs more of that. More people like you." "What about you?" Her eyes were starting to lose focus. "What do you do?" "I'm an engineer too. HVAC systems mostly. Nothing as noble as saving the planet." "But you saved me." Ethan squeezed her hand. "Anyone would have done the same." "No." Claire's eyes sharpened for just a moment, boring into his. "No, they wouldn't have. Everyone else ran away. You ran toward me." The sirens were getting closer now. Ethan could see people in reflective vests making their way down the street, emergency responders picking through the wreckage. "Here!" he called out, waving his free arm. "Over here. We need help." 2 paramedics broke away from the group and jogged over, their professional calm a stark contrast to the chaos around them. They took in the scene in seconds: Claire's crushed leg, the makeshift tourniquets, Ethan covered in her blood. "Good work," one of them said, already pulling out supplies. "You probably saved her life with those tourniquets." They moved with practiced efficiency, starting an IV, checking vital signs, calling for a stretcher. Ethan started to back away to give them room to work, but Claire's hand tightened on his. "Don't go," she said. "Please. What's your name? I don't even know your name." "Ethan. Ethan Walker. Ethan Walker." She repeated it like a prayer, like something to hold on to. I need to remember. I need to thank you." "You don't need to thank me. Just focus on getting better, okay?" The paramedics were loading her onto a stretcher now. Claire's grip on his hand loosened, had to, as they lifted her up. "Montgomery Corporation," she gasped out as they started to wheel her away. "I work at Montgomery. Find me there, please." Then they were moving, jogging toward an ambulance, and Claire was gone. Ethan stood there in the middle of the destroyed street, covered in blood that wasn't his shirt gone, his only suit ruined. Around him, the city was slowly beginning to function again. Emergency responders coordinating, people helping each other, the machinery of disaster response grinding into motion. He looked at his watch. 9:04. 4 minutes past his interview time. 4 minutes past his future. Ethan walked. What else was there to do? He walked through the damaged streets toward the Montgomery Corporation building, even though he knew it was pointless. Even though his shirt was gone and his hands were torn and bloody, and he looked like he'd been in a war. The Montgomery building stood mostly intact, its modern construction having weathered the earthquake better than the older structures around it. But the plaza in front of it was chaos. People evacuating, security trying to maintain order, someone shouting into a megaphone that the building was being cleared as a precaution. Ethan approached anyway. A security guard held up a hand. "Building's closed, sir. Everyone's evacuating." "I had an interview," Ethan said. The words sounded absurd even to him. "At 9, for the senior project manager position." The guard looked at him, really looked at him, taking in the blood, the torn hands, the missing shirt. "You okay, man? You need medical attention?" "It's not my blood. I'm fine. Is there any way to reschedule? To let them know I was coming, there was an earthquake, and there was a woman trapped, and..." He was babbling. He could hear himself babbling and couldn't stop. The guard's expression softened. "Look, man, I get it, but the whole building's shut down. Everyone's evacuating. There's no interviews happening today. Hell, probably no interviews happening this week. You should go home, check on your family." Noah. The thought of his son hit Ethan like a physical blow. The earthquake. Noah was home with Mrs. Chen, but what if something had happened? What if their building had been damaged? What if... Ethan pulled out his phone with shaking hands. 3 missed calls from Mrs. Chen, 5 texts. His heart stopped. Then he read the messages. We're fine. Building is fine. Noah is scared but okay. Where are you? Are you safe? Please call us. He called. Mrs. Chen answered on the first ring. Mr. Walker, thank God, are you all right? We've been so worried. I'm fine, I'm okay. Can I talk to Noah? Of course, here. Then his son's voice, small and frightened. Daddy? Hey, buddy, I'm okay. I'm not hurt. Are you okay? I was so scared. The whole building was shaking, and the TV fell over, and I thought you weren't coming back. Ethan closed his eyes, pressed the phone tight against his ear. I'm coming back right now. I'm getting on a bus, and I'm coming straight home, okay? I promise. What about your interview? It got canceled. The building had to evacuate. But that's okay. We're going to be fine. He could hear the relief in Noah's breathing, the way the tension bled out of his son's small voice. Okay, hurry home, Daddy. I will. I love you, buddy. Love you too. Ethan lowered the phone and stood there for a moment, just breathing. Noah was safe. His son was safe. Everything else was secondary to that. He looked up at the Montgomery building one last time, at the gleaming tower that had represented hope and possibility. Then he turned and started the long walk home. The buses weren't running in the immediate aftermath, so Ethan walked the 3 miles back to his apartment. The city was a strange mix of damage and normalcy. Some blocks looked like war zones, others barely touched. People were in the streets, checking on neighbors, sharing information. San Francisco, for all its inequality and dysfunction, still remembered how to be a community when it mattered. When he finally climbed the stairs to his apartment, he found Noah and Mrs. Chen in the doorway, waiting. Noah launched himself at Ethan, wrapping his arms around his father's waist and holding on like he'd never let go. You're home, Noah said, his voice muffled against Ethan's chest. You're really home. I'm home, Ethan confirmed, running a hand through his son's hair. I'll always come home to you, buddy. Always. Mrs. Chen was looking at him with concern, taking in his appearance. Mr. Walker, are you hurt? Is that blood? It's not mine. There was a woman trapped in the rubble. I helped get her out. Understanding dawned in Mrs. Chen's eyes. And your interview? Gone. Ethan tried to smile, but it came out more like a grimace. Building evacuated, but it's okay. It's okay. It wasn't okay. Not really. But standing there with his son in his arms, alive and safe after the earth had tried to shake them all apart, Ethan found he meant it more than he'd expected. They were alive. They had each other. Everything else would have to figure itself out. That night, after Noah had finally fallen asleep, clutching his stuffed elephant and refusing to sleep in his own room, instead curling up next to Ethan, Ethan lay awake staring at the ceiling. His hands were bandaged now, his muscles ached, and his only suit was in the trash, ruined beyond repair. He thought about Claire, wondered if she was okay, if the surgeons had been able to save her leg. He thought about the Montgomery Corporation, about the email that would probably come tomorrow or the next day, the polite rejection that wouldn't mention the earthquake, wouldn't care about the reasons he'd missed the interview. He thought about Jerry's texts, about the job he was probably going to get fired from for insubordination. He thought about his wife, about Sarah, and wondered what she would say if she could see him now. And then his phone lit up, a notification cutting through the darkness, an email. Ethan almost didn't check it. Nothing good came in emails at midnight, but something made him reach for his phone, made him open it. The subject line? Montgomery Corporation, interview status update. Ethan's heart clenched. Here it was, the official rejection. He opened it. Dear Mr. Walker, due to the earthquake and subsequent building evacuation, all scheduled interviews for Tuesday, October 7th, have been canceled. We will not be rescheduling these interviews at this time. We apologize for any inconvenience. The position has been filled with an internal candidate. We appreciate your interest in Montgomery Corporation and wish you the best in your job search. Sincerely, Human Resources Montgomery Corporation. Ethan read it twice, 3 times. Let the words sink in. The position was filled with an internal candidate. It had never really been available at all. They'd just been going through the motions, checking a box that said they'd interviewed external applicants. All those months of hoping, of preparing, of believing that this could be the thing that changed their lives. And it had been a phantom from the start. He should have felt crushed, should have felt devastated, and part of him did. That part that had been running on hope and determination for so long, it had forgotten how to stop. But another part of him, a deeper part, felt something different. He'd saved a woman's life today. Her name was Claire, and she worked on green buildings, on structures that gave back more than they took. And when she'd looked up at him from that rubble, she hadn't seen a failed interview candidate or a guy who couldn't get ahead. She'd seen someone who'd chosen to help when he could have walked away. Everyone else ran away. You ran toward me. Ethan set his phone down and looked over at Noah, sleeping peacefully now, the fear of the earthquake fading into dreams. His son, who built robots to help people. His son, who still believed in goodness despite everything the world had taken from him. The interview had been a lie. The opportunity had never been real. But what Ethan had done today, running toward someone who needed help, choosing humanity over ambition, that had been real. He didn't know what would happen tomorrow, didn't know how they'd make rent next month, or whether Jerry would actually fire him, or how they'd manage if he did. The future was as uncertain as it had ever been, maybe more so. But as Ethan finally drifted off to sleep, his son safe beside him, his hands aching from the work of saving a life, he found he could live with that uncertainty. Some things mattered more than interviews, more than six-figure salaries and corner offices. Some things, like running toward someone who needed help, like being the kind of man your son could be proud of, were worth whatever they cost, even if the cost was everything you'd hoped for, even if the cost was your future. Because sometimes, Ethan thought as sleep finally claimed him, sometimes doing the right thing doesn't give you the life you planned. Sometimes it gives you the life you deserve. The days after the earthquake blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and routine survival. Ethan went back to work on Thursday, 2 days after the quake, his hands still bandaged and his body aching in ways that reminded him he wasn't 20 anymore. Jerry was waiting for him in the office, arms crossed, that pinched expression on his face that meant he'd been nursing his grievances like fine wine. Walker, my office, now. The other engineers kept their heads down, pretending to focus on their monitors, but Ethan could feel their attention tracking him as he followed Jerry into the glass-walled office that overlooked the main floor. Jerry closed the door with more force than necessary and turned on him. You want to explain to me what the hell happened on Tuesday? Ethan kept his voice level. There was an earthquake, Jerry. You might have noticed. The whole city shook apart. Don't get smart with me. I'm talking about before that. I needed those plans checked, and you ignored my direct order. I was on my way to an interview. You knew that. I'd requested the time off 2 weeks ago. Jerry's face flushed red. And I told you we had a deadline. The client doesn't care about your interview, Walker. Neither do I. When I need something done, it gets done. That's how this works. Ethan looked at his boss, really looked at him, and felt something shift inside his chest. This man who'd been holding his career hostage for 3 years, who took credit for Ethan's designs and paid him half what he was worth, who created crises to maintain control. Jerry was small, petty, the kind of person who measured his own worth by how much he could diminish others. You know what, Jerry? You're right. The client doesn't care about my interview. They don't care that I missed the opportunity of a lifetime. They don't care that I helped pull a woman out of collapsed rubble while you were sitting safe in your office. They just care about their air conditioning plans. Watch your tone. No. The word came out harder than Ethan intended. No, I don't think I will. Because here's the thing, Jerry. I've been watching my tone for 3 years. I've been swallowing every insult, every impossible deadline, every time you took credit for my work. And for what? For this? He gestured around the cramped office. For the privilege of being treated like garbage? Jerry's expression had gone from red to purple. You're fired. You can't fire me. I quit. The words were out before Ethan fully realized he'd made the decision. But once they were in the air, hanging between them, he felt a strange lightness. Terror, yes, absolute bone-deep terror about how he'd pay next month's rent. But also freedom. What? I quit, Jerry. I'm done. I'll finish out the week so you can find someone else to dump your work on, but after Friday, I'm gone." He didn't wait for Jerry's response, just turned and walked out of the office, his heart hammering against his ribs. The other engineers were staring openly now. Ethan gathered his things from his desk. There wasn't much, he'd never bothered to personalize it, and walked out. It wasn't until he was on the street that the full weight of what he'd done hit him. He'd just quit his job. His terrible, soul-crushing, barely pays the bills job. The only thing standing between Noah and eviction. Ethan sat down on a bench and put his head in his hands. What had he done? What the hell had he done? His phone rang. Unknown number. Ethan almost didn't answer, but something made him swipe to accept. "Hello? Is this Ethan Walker?" A woman's voice, professional but warm. "Yes, this is Ethan. Mr. Walker, my name is Dr. Patricia Chen from San Francisco General Hospital. I'm calling about Claire Montgomery. She wanted me to reach out to you." Ethan straightened. Is she okay?" "She's stable. We were able to save her leg, though the recovery will be long. She's been asking for you. She wanted me to tell you that she's in room 412 and she'd very much like to see you if you're available." Yes, I can come. When?" "Visiting hours are until 8 this evening. I should warn you, Mr. Walker, Claire's been quite insistent about finding you. She says you saved her life." "I just did what anyone would have done." Dr. Chen's voice softened. "She doesn't think so. Neither do I, for what it's worth. The paramedics said those tourniquets you made probably bought her the time she needed. You should be proud of that." After he hung up, Ethan sat on the bench for a long moment, trying to process the last 20 minutes of his life. He'd quit his job. The woman he'd saved wanted to see him. The universe was spinning in directions he couldn't predict or control. He should have felt panicked, should have been spiraling into anxiety about money and the future and all the practical concerns that had dominated his life for years. But instead, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Curiosity about what happened next, about where this strange new path might lead. Ethan took the bus to San Francisco General. The city still bore the scars of the earthquake. Cracked streets, buildings with orange tags marking them unsafe, people working to clear debris. But there was also a strange energy in the air, that particular San Francisco resilience that came out in times of crisis. People helping neighbors, community organizations setting up aid stations, the city remembering what it meant to take care of its own. The hospital was chaos, the emergency department still overflowing with earthquake victims. Ethan navigated through the corridors until he found room 412. He paused outside the door, suddenly unsure. What did you say to someone whose life you'd saved? How did that conversation even work? He knocked softly. "Come in." The voice was stronger than he expected, though he could hear pain underneath it. Ethan pushed open the door and saw Claire for the first time in full light, not covered in dust and blood and terror. She was in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail and striking green eyes that fixed on him with an intensity that made him want to look away. Her left leg was elevated in a complex system of braces and machinery, and there were monitors beeping steadily beside her bed. "Ethan," she said his name like she'd been holding it close. "You came." "Of course. How are you feeling?" "Like a building fell on me." She smiled, and despite everything, the hospital room, the injuries, the pain that was clearly etched on her face, the smile was genuine. "But I'm alive. Because of you." Ethan moved further into the room, unsure where to put himself. "I'm glad you're okay. The doctor said they saved your leg?" "They did. It's going to be a long recovery, lots of physical therapy, probably never run a marathon. But I get to keep it." Her eyes never left his face. "I've been trying to find you. Spent 2 days having the hospital staff call every Ethan Walker in the Bay Area. There are apparently 47 of us." "I'm sorry. I should have come sooner. I just didn't know if you'd want to see me." "Want to?" Claire's voice cracked slightly. "Ethan, you're the only person I wanted to see. Do you know what it's like being trapped under concrete, convinced you're going to die there, and then someone appears? Someone who could have walked away, who should have walked away, but didn't. I couldn't just leave you. Everyone else did. I was screaming for 10 minutes before you got there. 10 minutes of watching people run past, too afraid or too focused on themselves to stop. And then you appeared, and you didn't even hesitate. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. I'm not a hero, Claire. What were you doing there? She interrupted. On that street? At that moment? The question hung in the air between them. Ethan could have lied, could have said he was just passing through, but something about the way Claire was looking at him, the directness in those green eyes, made lying feel impossible. I was on my way to an interview at Montgomery Corporation. Claire's expression changed, something flickering across her face too fast for Ethan to read. Montgomery? You were coming to interview at Montgomery? Yeah. Senior project manager position, 9 o'clock interview. I was 2 blocks away when the earthquake hit. And you stopped. You stopped to help me, knowing you'd miss it. There wasn't really a choice to make. There's always a choice, Ethan. That's what makes it matter. Claire was quiet for a moment, her fingers plucking at the hospital blanket. What happened with the interview? They canceled everything because of the earthquake. Sent an email that night saying the position was filled with an internal candidate anyway, so I guess it didn't matter in the end. It mattered, Claire said softly. It mattered to me. They talked for another hour. Claire told him about her work. She was a senior project manager at Montgomery Corporation, focused on sustainable building design, trying to push the construction industry toward environmental responsibility. She'd been with the company for 8 years, worked her way up from an entry-level position, was finally starting to have real influence on projects. Ethan told her about his work with Jerry, about the soul-crushing routine of designing HVAC systems for strip malls and big box stores. He told her about Noah, about being a single father, about trying to build a life on poverty wages in one of the most expensive cities in America. He didn't tell her about quitting his job that morning. That felt too raw, too uncertain. You know what I was doing when the earthquake hit? Claire asked. I was reviewing interview schedules. We had 12 candidates coming in that day for various positions. I was supposed to be conducting 3 of the interviews myself, including the senior project manager position. Claire nodded. That was mine. I'd reviewed all the applications, narrowed it down to 4 finalists. You were one of them, Ethan. Your application stood out. Not the most impressive resume, but something about your cover letter. You wrote about wanting to build things that mattered, about making your son proud. It felt real in a way most applications don't. Ethan felt something tight in his chest. You were going to interview me. I was, and now here we are, having a very different kind of conversation. A nurse came in then to check Claire's vitals and administer pain medication. Ethan took it as his cue to leave, but Claire caught his hand. Come back, she said. Please, come back and visit. I'm going to be stuck in this hospital for at least another week, and I could use the company. Besides, I feel like we have more to talk about. I'd like that, Ethan said, and meant it. Over the next week, Ethan visited Claire every day. He'd drop Noah off at school, spend a few hours in the hospital, then pick his son up and try to figure out how to explain to a 7-year-old that Daddy didn't have a job anymore. He hadn't told Noah yet, couldn't quite find the words. Claire's room became a strange refuge. They talked about everything, engineering and architecture, San Francisco's housing crisis, the ways the city had changed over the years. Claire was sharp and funny, with strong opinions and the confidence to back them up. She challenged Ethan in ways he hadn't been challenged in years, asked him questions about his work that made him think differently about what he'd been doing. You're wasting yourself, she said on the 3rd visit, while Ethan was describing a particularly tedious project Jerry had forced on him. HVAC systems for strip malls? Ethan, you have better training than half the people I work with. You could be designing real buildings, solving real problems. Could have, Ethan corrected. I quit on Thursday, or got fired. It was sort of mutual. Claire stared at him. You what? Yeah, Jerry pushed too hard one too many times, and I snapped, told him I was done. Do you have another job lined up? No, not even a prospect. So if you're looking for someone to give career advice to, you might want to find someone who hasn't just deliberately destroyed their own livelihood. But Claire wasn't laughing. She was looking at him with that intense expression again, the one that made Ethan feel like she was seeing through to something he couldn't see himself. What are you going to do? I don't know. Start applying again, I guess. There's got to be another Jerry out there willing to underpay me for my work. Maybe I'll get lucky and find one who's slightly less of a nightmare. Or, Claire said slowly, you could do something different. Different how? Start your own firm. Freelance, contract work. You have the skills, you have the experience. You don't need someone like Jerry taking advantage of you. Ethan laughed, but it came out bitter. With what money, Claire? I've got maybe $2,000 in savings. That'll cover rent for 1 month, maybe 2 if Noah and I eat nothing but ramen. I can't start a business with $2,000. You don't need much to start. A laptop, internet connection, some basic software. Most of what you need, you probably already have. And the startup costs for consulting, they're minimal. File some paperwork, build a website, start reaching out to your network. What network? I've spent 3 years working for Jerry. I don't have contacts, I don't have clients. Claire was quiet for a moment, and Ethan could see her thinking, weighing something. Then she said, "What if I helped you?" "What?" "Not with money," she clarified quickly. "I know that's not what you'd want, but with connections, introductions. I know people in the industry, people who need good engineers, who would value your work. I could make some calls, set up some meetings, just to get you started." Ethan shook his head. "Claire, I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking. I'm offering. You saved my life, Ethan. Let me help you save your career." "That's not... You don't owe me anything." "This isn't about owing. This is about not wanting to see someone with your talent wasting away working for people like Jerry." She leaned forward, wincing slightly at the movement. "Look, I get it. You're proud. You want to make it on your own. But sometimes accepting help isn't weakness. Sometimes it's just smart." Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to maintain his independence, his dignity. But he thought about Noah, about the rent that would come due in 3 weeks, about the emptiness where his job used to be. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay. Thank you." Claire smiled. "Don't thank me yet. I'm going to be a demanding mentor. You're going to have to actually do the work." "I can do the work. Work's never been the problem." "Good. Then let's start planning. Tell me about the kind of projects you actually want to work on, not Jerry's strip malls. If you could design anything, work on any kind of building, what would it be?" They spent the rest of the afternoon sketching out ideas. Claire was still on pain medication, sometimes losing her train of thought or drifting off mid-sentence, but when she was focused, she was brilliant. She saw possibilities Ethan hadn't considered, angles he'd never thought about. By the time visiting hours ended, they had the rough outline of a business plan. Walker Engineering Solutions. The name was Noah's idea, actually. Ethan had mentioned it that night while they were eating dinner, mac and cheese from a box, because Ethan still couldn't quite face telling his son about the job situation by cooking an elaborate meal he couldn't afford. "I might start my own company," Ethan said, trying to sound casual about it. "Do engineering work on my own. What do you think about that?" Noah's eyes went wide. "Like a real company? With a name and everything?" "Yeah, I need to come up with a name, though." "Walker Engineering Solutions," Noah announced immediately. "Because you're a walker and you solve problems, and solutions means fixing things." It was perfect, simple, professional, and conceived by a 7-year-old who still believed his father could do anything. That night, after Noah was asleep, Ethan sat at his laptop and started building a website. He wasn't a designer, but he knew enough HTML to cobble together something functional. He used a photo of Noah's cardboard robot as the logo, his son's creation, built to help people, representing everything Ethan wanted his company to be. By 3 in the morning, Walker Engineering Solutions had a website. By 4, Ethan had drafted a business plan. By 5, when the sun started creeping through the windows of their small apartment, he'd sent out his first round of emails to old college classmates, former colleagues, anyone he could think of who might know someone who might need engineering work. He slept for 2 hours and then got up to make Noah breakfast. Claire was discharged from the hospital on Friday, 10 days after the earthquake. Ethan offered to help her get home, but she waved him off. "My brother's coming to pick me up. He's been hovering like I'm made of glass. It's sweet and also deeply annoying. She was sitting in a wheelchair, her injured leg still in a brace, but there was color back in her cheeks and strength in her voice. "But I want you to come by next week. I'm going to start making those introductions I promised. Claire, you just got out of the hospital. You should be resting, not working contacts for me. I'll be sitting on my couch either way. Might as well make some phone calls." She pulled out her phone, typed something quickly, then looked up at him. "I just sent you my address, Tuesday at 2. Don't be late." "Yes, ma'am," she laughed. "I'm going to enjoy this, having someone actually listen to me for once." Tuesday came. Ethan dressed in slacks and a button-down shirt. Not as formal as the suit he'd ruined, but professional enough. Claire lived in Pacific Heights, in a Victorian that had probably cost more than Ethan would make in his entire lifetime. He rang the bell and heard footsteps. Then the door opened. Claire stood there on crutches, wearing jeans and a soft sweater, her hair down around her shoulders. She looked different outside the hospital, younger, more relaxed, though Ethan could see the pain she was managing in the tightness around her eyes. "You came," she said, smiling. "You told me not to be late. I'm terrified of disappointing you." "Smart man. Come in. I've made us lunch." The house was beautiful. High ceilings, original molding, hardwood floors that gleamed in the afternoon light. But it was also clearly lived in, comfortable rather than showy. Books stacked on tables, plants in the windows, a cat that appeared from nowhere to wind around Ethan's legs. "That's Archimedes," Claire said. "He thinks he owns the place. He's not wrong." They ate lunch in Claire's kitchen, soup and sandwiches that she'd had delivered, since cooking wasn't really an option with her mobility limitations. Then they got to work. Claire had compiled a list of contacts, 10 names, each with a brief description of who they were and what they might need. "These are all people I've worked with or know through the industry," she explained. "I've already reached out to most of them, mentioned that I know a talented engineer who's starting his own consulting practice. 3 of them have projects coming up that might be good fits." Ethan looked at the list, feeling overwhelmed. "Claire, this is incredible. I don't know how to thank you." "Thank me by doing excellent work and not making me look bad for recommending you." She tapped the first name on the list. "Start with Rebecca Zhao. She's an architect, runs a small firm focused on affordable housing. Good person, good projects. She mentioned she might need some structural engineering support on a project in Oakland. Email her today, mention my name." They went through the list one by one. Claire knew everyone's history, their quirks, what they valued in a contractor. It was a masterclass in networking, and Ethan took notes furiously. "The key thing to remember," Claire said, "is that in this industry, especially when you're starting out, it's all about relationships. People hire people they trust, and they trust people they know or who come recommended by someone they trust. You do good work for Rebecca," she tells her architect friends. They hire you, they tell their friends. It builds from there. And if I screw up, then you fix it, fast, completely, and without making excuses. Everyone screws up sometimes, Ethan. What matters is how you handle it. By the time Ethan left Claire's house that afternoon, he had a plan. Email Rebecca Zhao tonight. Follow up with 2 other contacts by Friday. Start working on a portfolio of his best work to show potential clients. Get his business license and insurance sorted out. It felt real, terrifyingly real. That night, Ethan sent the email to Rebecca Zhao. He agonized over every word, deleted and rewrote it 3 times before finally hitting send at 11 p.m. Then he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she'd even respond. She responded at 8 the next morning. "Hi, Ethan. Claire speaks very highly of you. Would love to chat about the Oakland project. Are you free for coffee Thursday morning?" Ethan read the email 5 times, making sure it was real, that he hadn't hallucinated it out of desperation. Then he responded immediately, trying to sound professional and not like someone who was barely holding his life together. They met at a cafe in the Mission. Rebecca Zhao was in her 40s, with streaks of gray in her black hair and the kind of focused energy that came from someone who loved her work. She explained the project, a mixed-use development in Oakland, 40 units of affordable housing with ground-floor retail, trying to be built on a tight budget. "The structural engineering firm I usually work with is backed up for 6 months," she said. "I need someone who can turn things around faster and who understands that we're working with non-profit budgets, not tech company money." "I can do that," Ethan said. My rates are competitive, and I'm used to making things work within budget constraints. Rebecca studied him. Claire said you saved her life during the earthquake. I helped her. I wouldn't say. She said you gave up a job interview to pull her out of the rubble, that you used your tie as a tourniquet and probably kept her from bleeding out. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. The paramedics did the real work. But you made the choice to stop, to help. Rebecca leaned forward. Look, I'm going to be straight with you. I'm taking a chance hiring someone who's just starting out. But Claire doesn't recommend people lightly, and the fact that you're someone who runs toward trouble instead of away from it, that tells me something about your character. So I'm going to give you a shot. Small project to start, see how we work together. If it goes well, there's more work coming. Ethan felt something unclench in his chest. Thank you. You won't regret this. Make sure I don't. They shook hands, and just like that, Walker Engineering Solutions had its first client. The work was hard. Harder than anything Ethan had done for Jerry, because now it was his name on the line, his reputation. He spent long nights at his laptop after Noah went to bed, running calculations and checking them twice, 3 times, making sure everything was perfect. Rebecca's deadline was tight. She needed preliminary structural drawings in 2 weeks. But Ethan threw himself into it with a focus he hadn't felt in years. He still visited Claire twice a week. They'd fallen into an easy rhythm. Ethan would bring coffee and updates on his work, and Claire would offer advice, make introductions, help him navigate the complicated politics of the construction industry. Sometimes they just talked about nothing and everything, the conversations ranging from the technical to the personal. How's Noah handling everything? Claire asked one afternoon. They were sitting in her living room, Archimedes purring in Claire's lap. He's good. I finally told him about quitting my job. He asked if that meant we'd have to move, and I said maybe, but that we'd figure it out. He seemed okay with it. More okay than I was, honestly. Kids are resilient. Too resilient sometimes. Like they have to be, because the adults in their lives can't keep it together. Claire was quiet for a moment. You're keeping it together, Ethan. You're doing more than that. You're building something. With your help. I couldn't do this without you. You could. It would just take longer. I'm just speeding up the inevitable. Ethan wasn't sure that was true, but he appreciated her saying it. He delivered Rebecca's drawings on time. She looked them over, had a few questions, some minor revisions, but overall, she was impressed. This is really good work, Ethan. Clean, thorough, exactly what I needed. How do you feel about taking on the full structural package for the project? I'd love to. Great. I'll have my office draw up a contract, and I'm going to introduce you to a few other architects I know. Fair warning, they're going to work you hard. But if you can handle it, there's plenty of work out there. Word spread faster than Ethan expected. Rebecca introduced him to 2 other architects. Claire connected him with a developer she knew who needed code compliance review on a renovation project. Each project led to another, referrals building on referrals. By the end of November, 6 weeks after the earthquake, Walker Engineering Solutions had 4 active clients and 3 more in the pipeline. The money was starting to come in, not a lot yet, but enough that Ethan could breathe slightly easier about rent. Enough that when Noah asked if they could get pizza for dinner instead of making pasta again, Ethan said yes without having to check his bank account first. But more than the money, there was something else. A sense of purpose. Of building something that was his, that reflected his values, that he could be proud of. When he worked now, it wasn't just to survive, it was to create. Noah's science fair was the first week of December. Ethan had been so consumed with work that he'd almost forgotten about it until Noah mentioned it at breakfast one morning. It's this Friday, Daddy. You're still coming, right? Guilt punched through Ethan's chest. Of course I'm coming, buddy. I wouldn't miss it for anything. Noah beamed. I finished my robot. Wait till you see him. I added lights. Friday afternoon, Ethan cleared his schedule and went to Noah's school. The gymnasium was full of projects, papier-mâché volcanoes and potato batteries and elaborate poster boards explaining the water cycle. And there, in the corner, was Noah's robot, now painted silver with LED lights that flashed in sequence. See? Noah was practically vibrating with excitement. The lights are powered by batteries I hid in his chest, and his grabber arms actually work. Watch. He demonstrated how the arms could pick up small objects, how the robot's eyes lit up when you pressed a button on its back. It was wonderful. creative and functional, and built with more love than engineering precision. Mr. Walker. Ethan turned to find a woman in her 50s approaching, wearing a teacher's badge. I'm Mrs. Patterson, Noah's teacher. I wanted to tell you how impressed I am with his project. The creativity, the problem solving, it's really exceptional. He did it all himself, Ethan said, feeling his chest swell with pride. I helped with a few tricky parts, but the design was all Noah. It shows. He told me that his robot is meant to help people, that he designed it to pick up things for people who can't bend down easily. That's a very empathetic perspective for a 7-year-old. Ethan looked at his son, who was now demonstrating the robot to another child. He's got a good heart. Better than mine. Mrs. Patterson smiled. I think he probably learned that from somewhere. When they announced the winners, Noah didn't win first place. That went to a 6th grader with a complicated solar panel setup. But he won 2nd place in his grade level, and the look on his face when he went up to accept his ribbon made every sleepless night, every struggle, every sacrifice worth it. I won, Daddy! Noah threw himself into Ethan's arms, the ribbon clutched in his small fist. I actually won! I'm so proud of you, buddy, so incredibly proud. That night, they celebrated with pizza and ice cream, real celebration, not the strained kind where Ethan was worrying about every dollar spent. And as Ethan watched his son carefully pin the ribbon to his bedroom wall, placing it right next to a photo of Sarah, he thought about how far they'd come. 2 months ago, he'd been trapped in a dead-end job, barely surviving, watching his dreams crumble. Now he had his own business, clients who respected his work, and a future that felt possible instead of predetermined. All because one morning, the earth had shaken, and he'd made a choice. The phone call came on a Wednesday in mid-December. Ethan was at his laptop, working on a structural review for one of Rebecca's projects, when his phone rang with an unknown number. Hello? Is this Ethan Walker? A man's voice, professional and slightly formal. Yes, speaking. Mr. Walker, my name is David Brennan. I'm a commercial developer here in San Francisco. Claire Montgomery gave me your name. She said you might be able to help with a project I'm working on. Ethan sat up straighter. I'd be happy to discuss it. What kind of project? Adaptive reuse of an old warehouse in Dogpatch, converting it to creative office space. It's a complicated building, old structure, some seismic concerns. Need someone who can think creatively about how to make it work within modern code requirements. They talked for 45 minutes. The project was larger than anything Ethan had tackled so far, with a budget that made his earlier projects look tiny by comparison. David wanted to meet in person, tour the building, discuss possibilities. I'm free Friday afternoon, Ethan said, trying to keep the excitement out of his voice. Perfect. I'll text you the address. And Ethan, Claire speaks very highly of you. I'm looking forward to seeing what you can do. After they hung up, Ethan sat staring at his phone. This was big. Really big. The kind of project that could establish Walker Engineering Solutions as a real player, not just a freelancer scraping by. He called Claire immediately. Did David Brennan just call you? She asked, answering on the first ring. Yes. Claire, this project, it's huge. I don't know if I'm ready for something like this. You're ready. Trust me, you're ready. David's a good guy, fair to work with, pays on time. This could be really good for you. How do I even begin to thank you for all of this? Claire was quiet for a moment. You know what, Ethan? I've been thinking about that. About what you did for me and what I'm doing for you. And whether any of it is really about debt or gratitude. What do you mean? I think maybe we're just two people who needed to meet each other. You needed connections and support to build your business. I needed to be reminded that there are still people in this world who run toward trouble instead of away from it. Maybe that's not about owing anything. Maybe that's just about being human. Ethan felt something shift in his chest, something warm and complicated. I'd like to think that's true. It is true. Now go knock this meeting with David out of the park. And Ethan, you're allowed to be proud of yourself. You've built something real here. That's worth celebrating. After they hung up, Ethan sat in his apartment, Noah's cardboard robot sitting on the table beside his laptop, the city humming outside his windows. 3 months ago, his life had been falling apart. Now it was coming together in ways he'd never imagined. The earth had shaken and everything had broken. But sometimes, Ethan was learning, things had to break before they could be rebuilt into something stronger. The warehouse in Dogpatch stood like a relic from another San Francisco, before the tech boom had transformed the city into something sleek and expensive. 4 stories of red brick, windows clouded with decades of grime. The kind of building that had probably housed everything from shipbuilding supplies to artist studios over its 100-year lifespan. Ethan stood outside on Friday afternoon, David Brennan beside him, both of them looking up at the structure with the practiced eye of men who saw buildings as puzzles to be solved. It was a mess. Beautiful, but a mess. "Can I see inside?" David unlocked the heavy door, and they stepped into what had once been a manufacturing floor. The space was cavernous, light streaming through the dirty windows in thick beams that illuminated dancing dust motes. Original wood floors, exposed brick walls, ceiling beams that were solid old-growth timber. Beneath the decay and neglect, there was something magnificent here. "What's your timeline?" Ethan asked, already doing calculations in his head, load-bearing capacity, seismic retrofitting, where the existing structure could be preserved and where it would need reinforcement. "I'd like to break ground by spring. That gives us about 4 months for design and permitting. Think you can do it?" 4 months. It was tight, especially for a building this complex. But Ethan walked through the space, running his hands along the brick walls, feeling the bones of the structure, and he knew he wanted this project. Needed it, maybe. "I can do it. I'll need to bring in a soils engineer, get some testing done on the foundation. And I'll want to consult with a seismic specialist. This building needs proper retrofitting, and I want to make sure we do it right." David nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the kind of thinking I want. Too many engineers just want to slap some steel beams in and call it done. This building deserves better." They spent 2 hours walking through the space, Ethan taking notes and photos, David sharing his vision for what the building could become. By the time they finished, the winter sun was setting, casting long shadows through the warehouse. "Send me a proposal," David said as they locked up. "Scope of work, timeline, fee structure. If it looks good, we'll get a contract drawn up. I'll have it to you by Wednesday." They shook hands, and Ethan walked back to his car, feeling electricity running through his veins. This was it. The project that could take Walker Engineering Solutions from a one-man operation to something real, something sustainable. He called Claire from the car, unable to wait. "How'd it go?" She answered. "It's perfect. Complicated and challenging and exactly the kind of project I want to be doing. He wants a proposal by Wednesday." "That's great, Ethan. I knew you'd impress him." There was something in her voice, something tired or sad that made Ethan pause. "You okay? You sound off." "Just a rough day. Physical therapy was brutal, and I got some news about work that wasn't great." "What kind of news?" Claire sighed. "Montgomery's restructuring. They're consolidating the Sustainable Design Division with General Project Management, which basically means the work I've been doing for 8 years is getting absorbed into the mainstream, watered down. They're offering me a lateral move into a different department, but it's not the same. It's not what I care about." Ethan heard the defeat in her voice, so different from her usual confidence. "I'm sorry, Claire. That's awful." "Yeah, well, welcome to corporate life, right? The things that matter get sacrificed for efficiency and profit margins. I shouldn't be surprised, but I am anyway." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet. Take the lateral move, probably. Keep collecting a paycheck while I figure out what I actually want, which is a depressing thought, but here we are." They talked for another 20 minutes, Ethan listening while Claire vented about office politics and short-sighted management decisions. By the time they hung up, he felt like their roles had reversed. She'd been supporting him for months, and now he was the one offering encouragement, telling her that things would work out. That weekend, Ethan threw himself into David's proposal. He worked while Noah was at a friend's house for a play date, worked late into the night after his son fell asleep, worked early Sunday morning while Noah watched cartoons. The proposal needed to be perfect, detailed but not overwhelming, ambitious but realistic, priced competitively but not so low that it screamed desperation. By Tuesday night, he had something he was proud of: 20 pages outlining scope of work, methodology, timeline, and fees. He'd even included preliminary sketches showing possible structural solutions, different approaches David could consider. He sent it Wednesday morning at 9 a.m., then spent the rest of the day trying not to obsessively check his email. David called at 4 p.m. Ethan, I've been reviewing your proposal. This is impressive work. Really thoughtful approach to the building's challenges. Ethan's heart was hammering. Thank you. I wanted to give you a clear sense of what we'd be looking at. I appreciate that. Look, I'm not going to play games here. I think you're the right person for this project. My attorney will send over a contract by Friday. If the terms work for you, we can get started next week. After he hung up, Ethan just sat at his laptop, staring at the screen, trying to process what had just happened. 6 months ago, hell, 3 months ago, this would have been impossible. Now it was real. Walker Engineering Solutions had landed a major project with a respected developer. He wanted to call someone, to share the news, to celebrate. His first instinct was to call Claire, but something stopped him. She was dealing with her own professional disappointments right now. Would hearing about his success just make her feel worse? Instead, he called his son's school and asked if he could pick Noah up early. Is everything okay? The secretary asked, concerned. Everything's great, Ethan said, grinning. I just want to spend the afternoon with my kid. They went to the Science Museum, something they hadn't been able to afford in months. Noah's eyes went wide at the exhibits, the hands-on demonstrations, the planetarium show that made him gasp with wonder. And when they stopped for ice cream afterward, Noah looked at his father seriously. Daddy, are we okay now? Like, really okay? Ethan thought about how to answer that. They still lived in the same cramped apartment. Money was still tight, and would be for a while. The future was still uncertain, full of risks and unknowns. But they were building something, together. Yeah, buddy, we're really okay. We're better than okay. Noah smiled, that pure 7-year-old smile that made everything worthwhile, and went back to his ice cream. Christmas came and went quietly. Ethan couldn't afford much. A few presents from thrift stores, a small tree from the lot selling Charlie Brown rejects. But Noah didn't seem to care about any of that. He was just happy to spend the day with his father, building a new robot from the cardboard and supplies Ethan had gathered, watching holiday movies, eating the cookies they'd baked together. Mom would have liked this, Noah said that evening, holding up a photo of Sarah. It was something he did sometimes, including her in their lives, even though she'd been gone for 3 years. She would have, Ethan agreed. She would have loved seeing how creative you are, how kind. She'd be really proud of you. Is she proud of you too? The question caught Ethan off guard. I don't know, buddy. I hope so. I think she is. You help people now, like you helped that lady in the earthquake. And you started your own company, like you always wanted to. Mom would think that's cool. Ethan pulled his son close, fighting back the emotions that were suddenly threatening to overwhelm him. Thanks, Noah. That means a lot. The new year arrived with typical San Francisco weather, cold and foggy, the kind of gray that made you forget the sun existed. Ethan started work on David's warehouse project, spending long days at the site taking measurements, coordinating with consultants, developing the structural plans that would bring the old building into the modern age while preserving its character. It was the kind of work that consumed him completely, the challenge of it scratching an itch he hadn't known he had. Every problem had multiple solutions, and finding the elegant one, the approach that was both practical and beautiful, felt like solving puzzles that actually mattered. He still saw Claire regularly, meeting for coffee or dinner once a week. She'd taken the lateral move at Montgomery, but was clearly unhappy about it. The spark that had defined her in the hospital, that intensity and passion, seemed dimmed. I spent 10 years fighting for sustainable design to be taken seriously at that company, she said over dinner one January evening. They were at a small Italian place in North Beach, sharing a bottle of wine that Ethan could now almost afford without anxiety. And now they're basically saying none of it mattered. Just fold it into general operations and stop bothering management about carbon footprints and environmental impact. So leave, Ethan said. You've got the experience, the reputation. There are other firms that would kill to have someone with your expertise. It's not that simple. Why not? Claire swirled her wine, not meeting his eyes. Because I'm scared. Because Montgomery is stable and known, and leaving means starting over somewhere else, proving myself all over again. What if I make the wrong choice? What if I end up somewhere worse? Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. It was the first time he'd initiated physical contact beyond professional handshakes and friendly hugs. Her fingers were warm, and they curled around his instinctively. Claire, you told me to start my own firm when I had $2,000 and no clients. You said accepting help wasn't weakness, it was smart. Maybe you should take your own advice. She laughed, but it was shaky. That was different. I was helping you because I owed you. You didn't owe me anything. You helped me because you saw something worth investing in. Well, I see something worth investing in too. You're brilliant and passionate and exactly the kind of person who should be leading sustainable design projects, not watching them get absorbed into corporate mediocrity. So what, I just quit? Walk away from a decade of work? No. You figure out what you actually want and then you build toward that. Maybe it's another firm. Maybe it's consulting. Maybe it's something completely different, but you stop settling for something that's killing your soul. Claire was quiet for a long time, her hand still in his. Then she said, "When did you get so wise?" "I had a good teacher." They talked for 3 more hours, long after they'd finished eating, the restaurant staff politely working around them. They talked about dreams deferred and risks worth taking, about building lives that reflected their values instead of just surviving. And somewhere in that conversation, something shifted between them, a recognition that this friendship they'd built was becoming something else, something neither of them had been looking for, but both of them needed. When Ethan finally drove Claire home, he walked her to her door. She leaned on her cane, still necessary for long distances, though her physical therapy was going well, and looked up at him in the porch light. "Thank you," she said, "for listening, for understanding, for being exactly what I needed tonight." "Anytime," Ethan replied. And then, because life was short and opportunities were fleeting, and they'd both already learned that lesson the hard way, he leaned down and kissed her. It was soft, tentative, a question more than a statement. But when Claire kissed him back, her free hand coming up to cup his cheek, it felt like an answer to something he hadn't known he was asking. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "I wasn't expecting that," Claire said. "Neither was I. Is it okay?" "More than okay, but Ethan, we should probably talk about this, about what it means, what we want." "I know, and we will. But right now, can I just say that I think you're amazing, and I've been wanting to do that for weeks?" Claire laughed, and it was the genuine, unguarded laugh he remembered from the hospital, before the weight of returning to normal life had settled on her shoulders. "You're not so bad yourself, Walker." They said goodnight, and Ethan drove home feeling like he was floating. It was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure, the possibility of something real with someone who understood him, who'd seen him at his worst and his best and chosen to stick around anyway. But with the elation came worry. What if this ruined their friendship? What if things didn't work out, and he lost not just a romantic partner but the mentor and confidant who'd helped rebuild his career? What about Noah? His son had only just started to stabilize after years of grief and uncertainty. Was Ethan being selfish, pursuing something that might bring more instability into their lives? He called his younger sister Maya, who lived in Portland and had been his sounding board for every major life decision since they were kids. "So let me get this straight," Maya said after he'd explained the situation. "You saved this woman's life. She helped you start your own business, and now you're catching feelings, and you're freaking out about it?" "I'm not freaking out. You called me at 11 p.m. You're freaking out." Ethan sighed. "What if I'm doing this for the wrong reasons? What if I'm just grateful or confused, or what if you genuinely care about her and she cares about you, and that's okay?" Maya's voice softened. "Ethan, you haven't dated anyone since Sarah died. I'm not saying you have to rush into anything, but you're allowed to be happy. You're allowed to want more than just survival. What about Noah? What about Noah? Kids are more adaptable than you think. And from what you've told me, Claire already knows him, already likes him. That's a good foundation. It feels fast. It's been 3.5 years since Sarah died. I know it doesn't feel that way to you, but Ethan, you've done the grieving. You've been a single father and held everything together and built a whole new career from nothing. You're allowed to want something for yourself now." After they hung up, Ethan checked on Noah, who was sleeping peacefully, his cardboard robot standing guard on the nightstand. His son, who'd weathered so much loss and change with such incredible grace, who deserved a father who was whole, not just functional. Maybe Maya was right. Maybe it was time to stop just surviving and start actually living. February brought rain and more progress on the warehouse project. The structural plans were coming together beautifully, a combination of seismic retrofitting and preservation that would make the building both safe and special. David was thrilled with the work, had already started showing the plans to potential tenants. "You've got a real talent for this, Ethan," he said during one of their site meetings, rain drumming on the old roof above them. "Most engineers I work with, they see buildings as problems to solve. You see them as something more, like they have stories to tell." "My wife used to say that," Ethan replied, surprised by the words coming out. He didn't talk about Sarah much, especially not with clients. She said buildings were like people. They all had history, character, things that made them unique. She thought I chose the wrong specialty, that I should have gone into historic preservation instead of HVAC. Smart woman. The smartest. David studied him for a moment. "You know, I've got another project that might interest you. Historic Victorian in Noe Valley needs a complete structural assessment and rehabilitation plan. Owner wants to preserve as much of the original building as possible while making it functional for modern living. Interested?" Ethan felt that familiar electricity, that sense of possibilities opening up. Definitely interested. "I'll make the introduction. And Ethan, you should think about expanding, bringing on some help. You're getting too much work for one person to handle." It was true. Between David's projects and the work that kept coming in through Claire's referrals and his own growing network, Ethan was working 60-hour weeks again, but this time it was different. He was building something, not just treading water. The thought of hiring someone was both exciting and terrifying. It meant overhead, payroll, responsibility for someone else's livelihood. But it also meant growing, scaling, becoming the kind of firm that could take on bigger projects. He mentioned it to Claire that weekend. They'd been seeing each other regularly now, carefully navigating what it meant to be dating while also being friends and professional colleagues. Noah had met her a few times, cautiously warming up to this new person in his father's life. "You should do it," Claire said. They were at her place cooking dinner together. Or rather, Ethan was cooking while Claire sat at the kitchen island, still limited in her mobility, but directing operations like a general. "Hire someone, an associate engineer, maybe a recent graduate who's hungry and talented. I barely make enough to pay myself consistently. How am I going to afford an employee?" "You're undercharging. I've seen your invoices, Ethan. You need to raise your rates." "I can't just double what I'm charging. My clients will leave." "Your good clients won't. And the ones who do leave aren't the clients you want anyway. You're providing value, real, significant value. You should be compensated accordingly." They went back and forth on this, Claire pushing him to recognize his worth, Ethan resisting out of fear and habit. Finally, she pulled out her laptop and made him walk through his actual costs, not just his time, but overhead, insurance, software, everything that went into running the business. "You see?" she said, pointing at the spreadsheet she'd built. "You're basically breaking even right now, maybe slightly profitable. But if you raised your rates by 30%, which is still below market for someone with your skills, you'd have actual margins. Room to hire help, room to grow." The numbers didn't lie. Ethan had been so focused on just surviving, on keeping clients happy, that he hadn't stopped to think about whether he was actually building a sustainable business. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay, you're right. I'll talk to David and Rebecca, explain that my rates are increasing for new projects. See what happens. They'll understand. And if they don't, I'll call them and explain why they're idiots for not paying you properly." Ethan laughed. "You're terrifying sometimes. You know that? That's why you like me." "One of the reasons." He kissed her then, and Claire pulled him closer, deepening the kiss. It still felt new, this physical intimacy, but it was becoming familiar in the best way, comfortable and exciting at once. "You know," Claire said when they finally broke apart, both of them slightly breathless, "I've been thinking about what you said. About figuring out what I want instead of just settling. Yeah? I think I want to leave Montgomery, start my own consulting practice, focus on sustainable design, help firms and developers implement green building practices, be an advocate for environmental responsibility in construction. Ethan felt pride surge through him. That's perfect. That's exactly what you should be doing. It's scary, though, leaving stability, striking out on my own. I don't have your courage. Are you kidding? You're the bravest person I know. You convinced a guy with $2,000 to start his own business. You've been fighting for sustainable design at a company that doesn't value it for a decade. That takes tremendous courage. Or tremendous stubbornness. Sometimes they're the same thing. Over dinner, pasta carbonara that Ethan had learned to make from YouTube videos, they talked about logistics. Claire had savings, could afford to take some time to build a client base. She had extensive contacts in the industry, people who respected her work. And unlike Ethan, she had a name that already carried weight. I want to do it right, she said. Not just recreate what I was doing at Montgomery, but really think about what impact I want to have, what kind of projects I want to work on, what kind of firm I want to build. You could do consulting, help other firms implement sustainable practices instead of trying to do all the projects yourself. Claire's eyes lit up. That's actually brilliant. Teaching architects and engineers how to integrate sustainability into their work from the start, not just as an add-on, building capacity across the industry instead of just working on individual projects. They spent the rest of the evening brainstorming, Ethan asking questions, and Claire's responses growing more animated, more excited. It was beautiful to watch. This woman who'd been dimmed by corporate frustration coming back to life, remembering what she cared about and why. Thank you, she said later, when they were curled up on her couch, Archimedes purring between them. For pushing me, for believing in me. You did the same for me. It's only fair. Is this weird? Claire asked suddenly. What we're doing? Professional colleagues who are also dating, who met under completely bizarre circumstances? Probably, Ethan admitted. But I like weird. Normal hasn't worked out so great for me. Me either. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and Ethan thought about the strange path that had led them here. An earthquake, a split-second decision, a choice to run toward danger instead of away from it. All the chaos and uncertainty that had followed, and somehow, impossibly, it had led to this, sitting with someone who understood him, who challenged him, who made him want to be better. Can I tell you something? Claire said quietly. Something I haven't told anyone else? Of course. That day when I was trapped under the rubble, I thought I was going to die. I really did. And my biggest regret wasn't anything grand or philosophical. It was that I'd spent so much of my life doing work I only half believed in, compromising my values for job security, playing it safe. I thought, if I survive this, I'm going to stop wasting time, stop settling. She turned to look at him, her green eyes serious. And then you appeared. This man who gave up everything to help a stranger, who didn't even hesitate. And I thought, that's what courage looks like. That's what it means to actually live according to your values, instead of just talking about them. Ethan felt his throat tighten. I'm not that brave, Claire. I was terrified that day. I'm terrified most days, honestly. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing the right thing anyway. She took his hand. You showed me that. The least I can do is live up to the example. March came, and with it a series of changes that felt like tectonic shifts. Claire gave notice at Montgomery, 2 weeks that felt like an eternity, as she wrapped up projects and said goodbye to colleagues. Some understood her decision, others thought she was crazy for leaving a stable position. But Claire held firm, and Ethan watched with admiration as she navigated the transition with grace. Ethan raised his rates, having the awkward conversations with existing clients that he'd been dreading, and to his surprise, not one of them balked. David actually laughed and said he'd been wondering when Ethan would figure out he was undercharging. Rebecca said she'd been paying him below his worth out of respect for his financial situation, but was happy to pay professional rates now that he'd made it official. With the increased income came the ability to hire help. Ethan posted a job listing for an associate engineer, received 40 applications, and spent a week conducting interviews. He finally settled on Marcus Chen, a recent graduate from Berkeley with an impressive portfolio and an infectious enthusiasm that reminded Ethan of himself 10 years ago, before the world had worn him down. "I won't let you down, Mr. Walker," Marcus said when Ethan offered him the position. "This is exactly the kind of work I want to be doing." "First rule," Ethan said. "Call me Ethan. We're a small firm. We don't need formality." "Yes, sir? I mean, Ethan." Having Marcus on board changed everything. Suddenly, Ethan could delegate tasks, could take on multiple projects simultaneously, could actually take an evening off without feeling like he was drowning. The quality of his work improved too, having someone to bounce ideas off, to catch errors, to offer fresh perspectives. Walker Engineering Solutions was becoming real, not just Ethan scrambling to survive, but an actual firm with employees and steady revenue and a growing reputation. Noah's 8th birthday fell on a Saturday in late March. Ethan had been planning it for weeks, wanting to make it special. They were in a better place financially now, but more than that, Ethan wanted to celebrate how far they'd come together. He invited 8 of Noah's classmates to a pizza place with an arcade, rented out a back room, bought a cake decorated like a robot. It was loud and chaotic and perfect. And when Noah blew out his candles, Ethan made a wish of his own, that his son's life would keep getting lighter, easier, more filled with joy. Claire came to the party, bringing a present she'd clearly spent time selecting, an advanced robotics kit that made Noah's eyes go wide with excitement. She fit naturally into the chaos, helping serve pizza, laughing at the kids' jokes, comfortable in a way that made Ethan's chest tight with something he wasn't quite ready to name. After the party, after all the other parents had collected their sugar-high children and departed, it was just the 3 of them, Ethan, Noah, and Claire, sitting in a booth with leftover pizza. "Did you have a good birthday, buddy?" Ethan asked. Noah nodded enthusiastically. "The best! Can we go home and start building the robot?" "Tomorrow. Tonight you need sleep. You've had enough sugar to power a small city." Noah giggled, then looked at Claire seriously. "Thank you for my present. It's really cool." "You're welcome, Noah. I thought you might like it." "Are you my dad's girlfriend?" The question hung in the air. Ethan felt his face heat up, but Claire handled it with aplomb. "Would that be okay with you?" she asked. "If I was." Noah considered this carefully. "I think so. You're nice, and you make my dad smile more. He didn't smile much before." Ethan felt something crack in his chest. Had he really been that transparent? Had his 7-year-old son been watching him be unhappy for years? "I like making your dad smile," Claire said gently. "He's a pretty great guy." "I know," Noah said matter-of-factly. "He's the best dad ever." That night, after Noah had finally crashed from his sugar high and fallen asleep clutching his new robotics kit, Ethan and Claire sat on his apartment's small balcony. It was a clear night, rare for San Francisco, stars visible between the light pollution. "You've got a special kid," Claire said. "I know, sometimes I can't believe I got that lucky." "He's lucky too, to have a father who loves him that much, who's willing to do whatever it takes to give him a good life." Ethan was quiet for a moment, then said, "When Sarah died, I thought that was it. I thought the happy part of my life was over, and everything after would just be about surviving, about getting through each day for Noah's sake. I never imagined I'd get to feel this way again." "What way?" "Happy. Genuinely, actually happy. Like the future is something to look forward to instead of something to survive." Claire took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "I feel the same way. Before the earthquake, I was so focused on my career, on fighting battles at Montgomery, that I was never going to win. I'd convinced myself that was enough, that work could substitute for everything else. But it can't. It doesn't." "What does?" "This. People who matter, building things that reflect your values, having the courage to choose what's important instead of what's safe." She looked at him, her expression serious. "You taught me that, Ethan. By choosing to help me when it cost you everything, by building a business on your own terms, by being exactly who you are instead of who you think you should be." "I just did what felt right." "That's exactly my point. You follow your instincts, your values, even when it's hard. Even when it costs you. That's rare." They sat together in comfortable silence, the city humming below them, the future stretching out with possibilities they were both brave enough to reach for. The earthquake had broken everything, Ethan's plans, his job, his carefully constructed life. But from those broken pieces, something new had emerged. Something stronger, more authentic, more true to who he actually was instead of who he'd been trying to be. Sometimes, Ethan thought, the world has to fall apart before you can build it back better, before you can build it back right. And sometimes, in the rubble and chaos, you find exactly what you didn't know you were looking for. Not just success or stability, but connection, purpose, the courage to become the person you were always meant to be. The person who runs toward trouble instead of away from it. The person who chooses people over opportunity, values over convenience, love over safety. The person who saves lives and rebuilds dreams and makes his son smile. The person who stands in the wreckage and decides not just to survive, but to truly, fully live. April arrived with the kind of weather that made people remember why they tolerated San Francisco's impossible housing costs. Warm days, cool nights, wildflowers blooming in unexpected places. Ethan found himself whistling as he worked, something he hadn't done in years, maybe ever. Marcus had settled into his role beautifully, taking on more complex tasks each week, freeing Ethan to focus on client relationships and business development. Walker Engineering Solutions now had 7 active projects, 3 more in the proposal stage, and a waiting list that Ethan would have considered fantasy 6 months ago. But success brought its own complications. The cramped apartment that had been adequate for survival felt suffocating now. Ethan's makeshift home office, really just a corner of the living room with a folding table and a laptop, was no longer functional with Marcus needing space to work too. They'd taken to meeting at coffee shops, libraries, anywhere with Wi-Fi and table space, but it was inefficient and unprofessional. "You need a real office," Claire said one evening. They were having dinner at his apartment, Noah already asleep, the remains of the spaghetti Ethan had cooked cooling on plates between them. "You can't run a growing firm from your living room. Office space in San Francisco costs a fortune. I've been looking at listings, and even a small space in a decent location is more than I want to commit to right now." "What about shared workspace? There are several co-working places that offer private offices at reasonable rates. You'd have professional space, conference rooms when you need them, and you're not locked into a long-term lease if things change." Ethan considered this. "That could work. You think Marcus and I could function in a shared space?" "Marcus could function in a closet as long as he has Wi-Fi and engineering software. That kid is dedicated." She wasn't wrong. Marcus often worked late into the evening, sending Ethan emails at midnight with questions or ideas. It reminded Ethan of himself at that age, before life had taught him that passion and dedication weren't always enough. "I'll look into it," Ethan said. "Maybe we can tour a few places this week." Claire set down her fork, her expression shifting to something more serious. "I need to tell you something about my own situation." "Okay, what's going on?" "I've been working on my business plan for the consulting firm, really digging into it, doing market research, developing my service offerings, and I think I'm ready to actually launch, not just talk about it." Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. "That's incredible, Claire. What's the timeline?" "I want to officially start May 1st. Give myself a month to finalize everything, build my website, reach out to potential clients. I've already got 3 people interested in consulting services. Architects who've worked with me before and want help implementing sustainable design practices. 3 clients before you've even officially launched. That's amazing." "It's terrifying," Claire corrected, but she was smiling. "I keep thinking about everything that could go wrong. What if those 3 clients are the only ones I ever get? What if I can't make the business sustainable? What if I'm making a massive mistake leaving a stable career?" "What if you're not?" Ethan countered. "What if you build something incredible? What if you change the construction industry's approach to environmental responsibility? What if you prove that sustainable design isn't just possible, but profitable?" Claire squeezed his hand. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple. It's terrifying and hard, and there will be days when you want to quit. But you're capable of this, Claire. More than capable." They talked late into the night, Ethan sharing everything he'd learned about starting a business. The practical stuff about business licenses and insurance and invoicing, but also the emotional stuff about managing fear and uncertainty. About trusting yourself when no one else does. About building something from nothing and having faith that the foundation will hold. "Thank you," Claire said when she was finally leaving close to midnight, "for believing in me, for understanding what this means." "Always," Ethan said, and kissed her goodbye at the door. After she left, Ethan stood in his quiet apartment, looking around at the space that had been home for 3 years. The worn couch he'd bought used, the mismatched furniture, the marks on the wall where Noah had once tried to paint a mural. It had served them well, this small refuge, but they were outgrowing it. Not just physically, but in every way that mattered. Maybe it was time for a bigger change than just an office. Maybe it was time to find a home that fit the life they were building, not the life they'd been surviving. The next week, Ethan toured 3 co-working spaces with Marcus. They settled on one in Soma, 2 private offices, access to conference rooms and a kitchen, surrounded by other startups and small firms. It was more expensive than Ethan had wanted to commit to, but Claire was right. They needed professional space. The lease was month to month with a 3-month minimum, manageable if things went sideways, but a real commitment nonetheless. "This is perfect," Marcus said, practically bouncing with excitement as they walked through the space. "We could set up our workstations here, use this wall for project boards, and the conference room access means we can bring clients in for meetings." Ethan signed the lease that afternoon, his hand only shaking slightly as he wrote the check for first month's rent and deposit. Another step forward, another commitment to the idea that Walker Engineering Solutions was real and growing and here to stay. Moving into the new office took a weekend. It wasn't much: 2 desks, computers, a printer, file boxes with project documents. But seeing Walker Engineering Solutions on the door, having a professional space that wasn't his living room, made everything feel more legitimate, more real. Noah came to see the office on Saturday afternoon, running between the 2 rooms and declaring it super cool. He'd set up his cardboard robot on Ethan's desk, and Marcus had immediately engaged him in a serious discussion about robotics and engineering principles that made Ethan's heart swell with gratitude for hiring someone who saw his son as a person, not an inconvenience. "Can I help with projects sometimes?" Noah asked as they were leaving. "I'm good at measuring things and organizing." "Tell you what," Ethan said. "During summer break, you can come to the office sometimes and help with small tasks. How's that sound?" "Like the best summer ever." That evening, Ethan got a call from David Brennan about the warehouse project. They were breaking ground in 2 weeks, ahead of schedule, and David wanted Ethan on site during the initial foundation work to address any issues that came up. "This is going to be a showcase project," David said. "Already got interest from some major tech companies looking for creative office space. Your structural design is a big part of what's selling it, the way you preserve the building's character while making it completely modern and safe. I'm going to be referring a lot of people your way, Ethan. You ready for that?" "I'll make it work," Ethan promised, though the thought of more growth, more responsibility, more clients depending on his expertise sent a spike of anxiety through his chest. But this was what success looked like, wasn't it? Not just surviving, but thriving. Not just getting by, but actually building something that mattered. May brought Claire's official launch. She'd created a website that was elegant and professional, outlining her services: sustainable design consulting, lead certification support, environmental impact analysis, staff training for architecture and engineering firms. Her rates were higher than Ethan had expected, but Claire had been firm about pricing herself appropriately. Women, especially women in technical fields, consistently undercharge for their services, she'd explained. "I'm not going to perpetuate that pattern. I'm good at what I do, and I deserve to be compensated accordingly." Her first month brought 5 consulting contracts, more than she'd anticipated. Word spread quickly through the architecture and development community that Claire Montgomery had gone independent, and people who'd valued her work at Montgomery were eager to hire her directly. "I think I'm actually going to make this work," she said one evening. They were at her house, celebrating her first month in business with wine and takeout Thai food. "Like really work, not just survive." "Of course you are," Ethan said. "You're brilliant and experienced, and people know it. I'm also terrified every single day that it's all going to collapse." "Welcome to entrepreneurship. The terror never really goes away. You just get better at functioning through it." Claire laughed. "That's weirdly comforting." They'd fallen into a comfortable rhythm, spending several evenings a week together, alternating between her place and his. Noah had fully accepted Claire as part of their lives. asking about her when she wasn't around, showing her his school projects and robot creations. It felt natural, this blending of their lives. In a way, Ethan had worried it wouldn't. The only person who seemed uncertain about the arrangement was Mrs. Chen, who still watched Noah occasionally, but had been gradually phased out as Ethan's schedule became more flexible. "Mr. Walker," she said one afternoon when he picked Noah up from her apartment, "I need to talk to you about something." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Is everything okay? Did something happen with Noah?" No, Noah is wonderful as always. But I wanted to tell you, I'm moving. My daughter in Sacramento, she needs help with her children. I'm going to live with her, help raise my grandchildren." Relief that nothing was wrong mixed with disappointment at losing someone who'd been a crucial support. "When are you moving?" "End of the month. I'm sorry for the short notice. But I see you have the new office now. You can bring Noah there sometimes. And there's Ms. Claire. Noah talks about her a lot. Maybe she can help when you need someone?" After Mrs. Chen left, Ethan mentioned the situation to Claire over the phone that evening. "I can definitely help with Noah," Claire said immediately. "I like spending time with him, and my schedule is pretty flexible right now. Claire, I can't ask you to be my childcare solution. That's not fair to you." "You're not asking, I'm offering. Besides, it's not like I'd be doing it alone. You're right there most of the time now with the office situation. I'd just be backup, someone Noah can hang out with when you need to be in meetings or on site visits." "Are you sure? This is a big step." There was a pause, and Ethan could hear Claire thinking on the other end of the line. Then she said, "Ethan, I'm already in this. I'm in this with you and with Noah. Helping with childcare isn't some burden. It's part of being in someone's life. If that's too much, too fast, we should talk about it. But if you're okay with it, I am too." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. They'd been dancing around the question of what they were to each other, how serious this relationship was becoming. This felt like Claire's way of answering that question without asking it directly. "I'm okay with it," Ethan said quietly. "More than okay." "Good. Then tell Noah he's stuck with me." June meant the end of the school year, and Noah's third-grade teacher had called Ethan in for an end-of-year conference. Ms. Patterson sat across from him in the two small classroom chairs, Noah's portfolio of work spread between them. "I wanted to talk to you about Noah's progress this year," she said. "Academically, he's doing wonderfully, reading above grade level, strong in math, curious and engaged. But what's really struck me is the change I've seen in him over the past few months." "Change how?" "He's more confident, more willing to take risks, to share his ideas. Earlier in the year, he was quieter, more hesitant. But recently he's been lighting up, raising his hand more, participating in group projects, even helping other students." She smiled. "I don't know what's changed at home, but whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Ethan felt emotion tighten his throat. He'd been so worried about how his struggles would affect Noah, about whether his son was suffering from their financial stress and his father's exhaustion. But maybe the opposite was true. Maybe stability, the real kind, not the white-knuckle survival version, was giving Noah space to flourish. "We've had some positive changes," Ethan said. "Things are better than they were." "It shows. Noah is a remarkable kid, Mr. Walker. You should be very proud." That evening, Ethan took Noah out for ice cream to celebrate the end of school. "Ms. Patterson says you had a great year," Ethan said as they sat on a bench, watching the fog roll in over the bay. Noah swung his legs, focused on his ice cream. "It was pretty good. Better than second grade." "What made it better?" Noah thought about this seriously. "I guess because you weren't sad anymore. You used to be sad a lot, even when you were smiling. But now you're different, like actually happy, not pretend happy." The observation hit Ethan hard. His 7-year-old son had been carrying the weight of his father's unhappiness, watching and worrying and adjusting his own behavior accordingly. How had Ethan not seen that? "You're right," he said quietly. "I was sad for a long time after Mom died. But I'm better now, happier. And a lot of that is because of you, buddy. You make me want to be better." "Is Ms. Claire part of why you're happy?" "Yeah, she is." "How do you feel about that?" Noah licked his ice cream, considering. "I like her. She's smart and funny, and she doesn't treat me like a baby. And she really likes you, I can tell. She looks at you the way Mom used to look at you in pictures. Ethan hadn't expected that, the casual comparison to Sarah. Does that bother you, that I care about someone who's not Mom? No. Mom wouldn't want you to be alone forever. She told me that, remember? Right before she died. She said that if anything happened to her, you'd be sad, but you'd be okay eventually, and that I should help you be okay. Ethan didn't remember Noah being in the room for that conversation, didn't remember Sarah saying those words where their son could hear. But grief did strange things to memory, fractured it, and rearranged it in ways that didn't always make sense. I think you've done a pretty good job helping me be okay, Ethan said, pulling his son close. They sat together watching the sunset, eating ice cream, and Ethan felt a sense of peace he hadn't known was possible. The life they were building, messy and uncertain and nothing like what he'd planned, was good. Really, genuinely good. The warehouse project hit a snag in mid-June. During the foundation work, they'd uncovered evidence of soil contamination, probably from the building's industrial past, when environmental regulations were more suggestion than law. It meant delays, environmental remediation, additional costs that David hadn't budgeted for. How bad is it? David asked during an emergency meeting at the site, the construction crew standing idle while they waited for environmental engineers to complete their assessment. Won't know for sure until we get the full report, Ethan said. But based on what they found so far, we're looking at a minimum 2-month delay, probably more. And depending on how extensive the contamination is, it could require significant remediation work. David ran a hand through his hair, the stress evident on his face. 2 months puts us into fall. I've got tenants lined up expecting to move in by October. If we push that to December or later, some of them might walk. I know, I'm sorry, David. There was no way to predict this. I know it's not your fault, but damn it, this project was going so smoothly. They spent the next week managing the fallout, environmental reports, consultations with remediation specialists, revised timelines and budgets. It was tedious, frustrating work that had nothing to do with the elegant structural solutions Ethan enjoyed and everything to do with the messy reality of old buildings and environmental regulations. But through it all, David remained professional, never taking his frustration out on Ethan or the team. And when the remediation plan was finally approved and they could restart construction, he pulled Ethan aside. Thank you for staying on top of this. A lot of engineers would have disappeared when things got complicated. Let me deal with it alone. You didn't do that. It's my project too, Ethan said. When things go wrong, we solve them together. That's why I like working with you. You're in it for more than just the paycheck. The experience reinforced something Ethan had been learning over the past months, that success in business wasn't just about technical competence. It was about relationships, trust, being the kind of person others wanted to work with when things got hard. Jerry had never understood that, had seen every project as a transaction, every person as either useful or disposable. But Ethan was building something different, a firm where relationships mattered, where doing right by clients and collaborators was as important as the technical work itself. July brought another development Ethan hadn't anticipated. Rebecca Zhao called with a question that was really an opportunity. I've got a project coming up that's bigger than anything I've done before, she said. 100-unit affordable housing complex, 4 buildings, full city block in the Mission. The nonprofit developer specifically wants architects and engineers who understand the community, who will prioritize quality over cutting costs. They're looking for a structural engineer. Want me to put your name forward? How big are we talking? Multi-million-dollar project, year-long timeline, maybe longer. It would essentially be your firm's primary focus for the duration. Ethan's mind raced. This was exactly the kind of project he'd dreamed about. Meaningful work at significant scale, the chance to prove Walker Engineering Solutions could handle major developments. But it was also terrifying. What if he screwed up? What if the project failed and took his reputation with it? Give me 24 hours to think about it? He asked. Of course. But Ethan, don't overthink this. You're ready. That evening, Ethan talked it through with Claire and Marcus. They sat in the office conference room, spreading out the details Rebecca had shared, discussing capacity and risk and opportunity. This could transform the firm, Marcus said, his enthusiasm evident. This is the kind of project that establishes credibility, that leads to more major work. We'd need to bring on more help probably, but the revenue would support it. It's also a lot of risk, Ethan countered. If something goes wrong on a project this size, it could destroy everything we've built. Claire, who'd been quiet, spoke up. Can I offer a perspective? Please? 6 months ago, you were working for Jerry, barely surviving, convinced your career was over. Now you're being offered $1 million project by a respected architect. That didn't happen by accident, Ethan. It happened because you're good at what you do, because you've built a reputation for quality and integrity. Rebecca isn't taking a risk by recommending you. She's making a smart choice based on your proven track record. But what if I'm not ready? What if I can't handle something this complex? Then you'll figure it out the same way you figured out everything else. You'll work hard, ask for help when you need it, and do whatever it takes to deliver excellent work. She reached across the table and took his hand. You're not the same person you were 6 months ago. You've grown. Your firm has grown. Maybe it's time to start believing in yourself the way everyone else already does. Marcus nodded enthusiastically. I'll help however I can. Pull longer hours, take on more responsibility, whatever you need. Ethan looked at these two people who believed in him, who saw possibilities where he saw only risk. And he thought about Noah, about building a life that would make his son proud, about Sarah's voice from 3 years ago, telling him to take chances, to dream bigger. Okay, he said. Okay, I'll tell Rebecca to put my name forward. Let's do this. The decision felt momentous, like standing at the edge of a cliff and choosing to jump. But maybe that was how all real progress happened. Not through careful calculation, but through courage. Through choosing possibility over safety, growth over stagnation. They celebrated that night, the three of them plus Noah, who didn't fully understand what they were celebrating but was happy to have pizza and cake anyway. Claire had started keeping some of her things at Ethan's apartment, and seeing her toothbrush next to his in the bathroom, her favorite tea in the kitchen, felt significant in a way Ethan couldn't quite articulate. They were building something together, something that went beyond professional collaboration or casual dating, something real. Thank you, Ethan said later, after Noah had gone to bed and Marcus had headed home, for pushing me to take this opportunity. I would have talked myself out of it if you hadn't. Claire was curled up against him on the couch, Archimedes purring on her lap. You would have figured it out eventually. I just sped up the process. You do that a lot, speed up my process. Someone has to. Left to your own devices, you'd still be working for Jerry and being miserable about it. Probably true. Ethan kissed the top of her head. Can I ask you something? Always. Where's this going? Us, I mean. We've been dancing around it for months, but I think we should actually talk about what we're doing. Claire sat up slightly, turning to look at him. What do you want it to be? I want... Ethan paused, trying to find the right words. I want you in my life, really in it, not just as someone I'm dating casually. I want Noah to have you as part of his world, as someone stable and constant. I want to build a future that includes you. That's a lot, Claire said softly. That's serious. I know, and if it's too much too fast, tell me. We can slow down. But I think I'm falling in love with you, Claire, and I wanted you to know that. The words hung in the air between them, vulnerable and honest. Ethan held his breath, waiting for her response. Claire's eyes were bright, suspiciously bright. You know what's funny? I've been trying not to fall in love with you, telling myself it was too complicated, that we had too much professional overlap, that I needed to focus on my career, but none of that matters, does it? Because I fell anyway. Yeah? Yeah, I'm in love with you, Ethan Walker. With you and your ridiculous heroic complex, and your talented kid, and your determination to do right by everyone even when it costs you. I'm all in. Ethan pulled her close and kissed her, and it felt like coming home. Like finding something he'd been searching for without knowing he was looking. When they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling. So what now? Claire asked. Now we keep building. Together. See where this goes. I like that plan. August brought the news that Ethan's proposal for the affordable housing project had been accepted. He and Marcus celebrated by taking Noah to the arcade, spending an irresponsible amount of money on games and winning a giant stuffed panda that barely fit in the car. Noah was delighted, and watching his son's joy made every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, worth it. The project officially kicked off in September, and suddenly Ethan's days were consumed with meetings, site visits, coordination with Rebecca and her team, managing Marcus and the 2 additional contract engineers they'd brought on to handle the increased workload. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure, the kind of challenge that pushed Ethan to be better than he'd ever been. Claire was managing her own growth, having taken on 2 major clients who wanted comprehensive sustainability audits of their development pipelines. They'd become partners in the truest sense, supporting each other's professional challenges, celebrating wins, commiserating over setbacks, finding balance between work and life, and the relationship they were building together. "We should move in together," Claire said one evening in late September. They were at her house, having dinner after a particularly grueling week. "I know that's a big step, but I'm spending half my time at your place and you're here the other half. It feels silly to maintain 2 separate households." Ethan had been thinking the same thing, but hadn't wanted to push. "What about Noah? Have you thought about what it means to live with a kid full-time?" "I've been basically doing that for months already. And I love it, Ethan. I love being part of his routine, helping with homework, hearing about his day. I'm not trying to replace his mother, but I want to be someone important in his life." "You already are, but we should talk to Noah about it. Make sure he's comfortable with the idea." They approached it carefully, sitting Noah down the next weekend and explaining what they were thinking. Noah listened seriously, asking questions about logistics. Would they move to Claire's house, or would Claire move to their apartment? Where would his robot collection go? Would Archimedes like him? "So you'd be like my stepmom?" Noah asked finally. Claire exchanged a glance with Ethan. They hadn't talked about marriage, hadn't gone anywhere near that conversation, but Ethan found he wasn't opposed to the idea. Eventually, when the time was right. "Not officially," Claire said gently. "Your dad and I aren't married, but I'd be someone who lives with you and helps take care of you and loves you very much." Noah nodded slowly. "Okay, I think that would be good. But can we bring my robots?" They decided Claire's house made more sense, bigger space, better neighborhood, room for Noah to have his own bedroom instead of sharing walls with his father. The move happened in early October, a weekend of boxes and furniture, and Noah's excitement at having a real house with a yard and a cat who tolerated his attempts at friendship. That first night in their new home, after Noah had finally fallen asleep in his new bedroom, Ethan and Claire sat on the porch with wine, looking out at the San Francisco skyline glittering in the distance. "We did it," Claire said. "We actually built this life." "Together," Ethan added. "None of this would have happened without you." "That's not true. You were already on your way. I just helped speed up the journey." Ethan thought about the man he'd been a year ago, desperate, exhausted, trapped in a job that was killing his spirit, convinced he'd missed his chance at a better life. That man wouldn't recognize who Ethan had become. The successful business owner, the confident professional, the man who'd found love again when he thought that part of his life was over. "Can I tell you something?" Ethan said. "Something I've never told anyone?" "Of course." "That day, when the earthquake hit, when I saw you trapped under the rubble, for just a second I almost kept walking. I looked at my watch and thought about the interview and how much it mattered, and I almost convinced myself someone else would help you, that I couldn't be the one to sacrifice everything." Claire was quiet, listening. "But then I heard my wife's voice in my head, telling me I couldn't walk past someone who needed help, and I thought about Noah, about what kind of man I wanted him to see when he looked at me. And I knew I had to stop, had to help, even if it cost me everything." "And it did cost you everything," Claire said softly. "Your interview, your suit, probably your job eventually. But I got something better. I got you. I got a career I'm proud of. I got the chance to become the person I was supposed to be instead of the person I'd settled for being." He turned to look at her, this woman who'd changed his life in ways he was still discovering. "So thank you for being trapped under that rubble, for giving me the chance to choose who I wanted to be." Claire laughed, wiping at her eyes. "That might be the weirdest thank you I've ever received. I'm serious. That moment, stopping to help you, that was when everything changed. When I learned that doing the right thing doesn't make you a loser. It makes you human. You're welcome then, for almost dying so you could find yourself." They sat in comfortable silence, the city humming below them, their new life stretching out with possibilities neither of them had imagined a year ago. The earthquake had broken everything, had torn apart carefully constructed plans and forced terrible choices. But from that destruction had come something beautiful, something real, something worth every moment of fear and uncertainty. Sometimes the world has to shake apart, Ethan thought, before you can build it back better. Before you can build the life you were always meant to live, with people who make you brave enough to take chances, to run toward danger instead of away from it, to choose love over safety and truth over comfort. The person who saves lives and builds dreams and makes his son proud. The person who stands in the wreckage and decides not just to survive, but to truly, fully live. November arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that made San Francisco feel like a postcard of itself. The affordable housing project was in full swing, and Ethan found himself spending more time on construction sites than in the office, hard hat permanently in his car, boots caked with the kind of mud that only comes from active building sites. Marcus had stepped up beautifully, managing the day-to-day operations while Ethan focused on the field work, and the 2 additional contract engineers they'd brought on were proving their worth. Walker Engineering Solutions had become exactly what Ethan had dreamed of. A firm that did meaningful work, that treated people well, that made a difference. But success brought visibility, and visibility brought complications Ethan hadn't anticipated. He was on site one Tuesday morning reviewing foundation work with the general contractor when his phone rang. Unknown number, but something made him answer. "Is this Ethan Walker?" A woman's voice, professional and clipped. "Yes, speaking." "Mr. Walker, my name is Jennifer Hahn. I'm a reporter with the San Francisco Chronicle. I'm working on a story about the October 7th earthquake 1 year ago, focusing on stories of everyday heroism. Your name came up in connection with saving a woman's life. Claire Montgomery. Would you be willing to talk to me about that?" Ethan felt his stomach drop. "I'm not sure what you're looking for. I just helped someone who was trapped. It wasn't heroic, just human." That's exactly the kind of story I want to tell. People who made choices to help others when they could have walked away. Claire gave me your contact information. She said you'd be modest about it, but that your actions that day were remarkable. Claire gave you my number? With your permission, according to her. She said she'd mentioned the possibility of press coverage, and you'd been okay with it. Ethan tried to remember that conversation. Had Claire mentioned something about this? Maybe weeks ago, in passing? He'd been so consumed with work that whole conversations sometimes blurred together. "I really don't think my story is that interesting," Ethan said. "I did what anyone would have done." But most people didn't. We have documentation from first responders that dozens of people passed Claire before you stopped. That makes it interesting, Mr. Walker. Could I buy you coffee sometime this week? Just an informal conversation, no pressure. Against his better judgment, Ethan agreed to meet her Thursday afternoon at a cafe near the office. When he mentioned it to Claire that evening, she was surprised by his hesitation. "Why wouldn't you want to tell the story?" she asked. They were in the kitchen of their shared house, working together to make dinner while Noah did homework at the table. It still felt surreal sometimes, this domestic scene, the normalcy of it after years of struggle, because it feels like capitalizing on something that was just basic human decency. "I didn't save you for recognition or publicity." "I know that, but stories matter, Ethan. Stories about people choosing to help, choosing compassion over convenience. They matter, especially now. The world needs to know those people exist." "You really think so?" "I do. And honestly, I think it could be good for the business too. Human interest story about a single dad who gave up his dream job interview to save a stranger, who then built his own successful firm. That's compelling. People remember stories like that." Noah looked up from his math homework. "You're going to be in the newspaper? That's so cool. Can I bring it to school?" The interview with Jennifer Hahn turned out to be more intense than Ethan expected. She was thorough, asking detailed questions about that day, what he'd been thinking, what choices he'd made, how it had felt to watch his future disappear while he worked to save a stranger. She wanted to know about his relationship with Claire, too, about how they'd reconnected, about whether the earthquake had brought them together romantically. "That's a complicated question," Ethan said carefully. "Claire helped me start my business, became a mentor and friend. The romantic relationship developed later, separate from the rescue. But would you have met her at all if you hadn't stopped that day? If you'd made it to your interview? Maybe, maybe not. Life's full of those what-ifs. Jennifer scribbled notes, then looked up with sharp eyes. Claire told me something interesting. She said she was supposed to be conducting your interview that day, that you were coming to interview with her specifically. Ethan nodded. I didn't know that at the time, obviously. Found out later when we reconnected. That's remarkable. The person you saved turned out to be the person who could have given you the job you were trying to reach. Do you ever think about the symmetry of that? How your act of sacrifice ended up connecting you to someone who'd help your career anyway? I try not to think about it that way. It wasn't transactional. I didn't save Claire expecting anything in return. But you got something anyway. A successful business, a relationship, a completely different life than you would have had if you'd made that interview. The conversation left Ethan unsettled. Jennifer wasn't wrong. The chain of events was remarkable, almost too neat. But framing it as some kind of cosmic reward for good behavior felt wrong, like it diminished the genuine struggle and work that had gone into building Walker Engineering Solutions. He hadn't earned his success by saving Claire. He'd earned it through long nights and hard work and learning to believe in himself. The article ran 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, a full-page feature in the Sunday Chronicle with a photo of Ethan and Claire at the warehouse construction site. The headline read, "The earthquake that changed everything, how one man's choice to help a stranger led to an unexpected future." Ethan read it over coffee that morning, his stomach tight with anxiety. The article was well written, focusing on the human elements, the choice he'd made, the relationship that had developed, the businesses they'd both built. Jennifer had interviewed Rebecca and David too, getting quotes about Ethan's professional abilities that made him uncomfortable with their praise. But the part that made Ethan's chest tighten was near the end, where Jennifer had written, "Walker's story raises an interesting question about the nature of heroism and reward. He gave up what seemed like his last chance at professional stability to help a stranger, and in doing so, found something better than what he'd been chasing. It's a narrative that feels almost too perfect, like the universe rewarding good behavior. But Walker himself resists that framing. I got lucky," he told me. "Claire's help, the business opportunities that came. Those weren't rewards for saving her. They were the result of hard work and people believing in me." Perhaps that's the real lesson of Walker's story, that doing the right thing doesn't guarantee a happy ending, but it does guarantee you'll be able to live with yourself. The success came later, earned separately, built on the foundation of integrity he'd already demonstrated. "What do you think?" Claire asked, reading over his shoulder. "I think I sound pretentious, like someone trying too hard to be humble." "You sound authentic," which in journalism is practically the same thing as pretentious. She kissed his cheek. "It's a good article, Ethan. Honest. You should be proud." The response to the article was immediate and overwhelming. Ethan's phone started ringing Monday morning and didn't stop. Reporters from other outlets wanting follow-up interviews, people congratulating him, potential clients who'd read the article and wanted to discuss projects. His email inbox exploded with messages ranging from genuine business inquiries to random people sharing their own earthquake stories to a few cranks who accused him of publicity seeking. Marcus handled most of it with good humor, screening calls and forwarding only the legitimate business inquiries. But the attention was disorienting, making Ethan feel exposed in ways he hadn't anticipated. "Is this what being famous feels like?" he asked Claire one evening, scrolling through his 4th day of overwhelming responses. "Because I don't like it." "You're not famous. You're just having your 15 minutes. It'll die down soon, and life will go back to normal. Mostly." She was partially right. The media attention faded after a few weeks, but the business impact lingered. 3 significant new clients came directly from the Chronicle article, and Ethan found himself recognized occasionally when meeting with potential clients or at industry events. It was strange, being known for something other than his technical work, but it also opened doors. People remembered his name, remembered the story, and that recognition translated into opportunities. Thanksgiving came, and for the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel the weight of that holiday's enforced gratitude. He actually was grateful for Claire, for Noah's happiness, for the business he'd built. for this life that felt full instead of just functional. They celebrated at home with Claire's brother visiting from Seattle, and Noah's excitement at having extended family around made Ethan realize how isolated their small family unit had been for years. "This is nice," Claire's brother Michael said, helping with dishes after dinner while Noah showed his robot collection to Michael's wife in the living room. Seeing Claire this happy, she was killing herself at Montgomery, trying to force change in a system that didn't want to change. Now she's doing meaningful work on her own terms, and she's got you and Noah. It's good. "She makes us better," Ethan said simply. "Both of us. I don't know what we did to deserve her, but I'm grateful every day." Michael smiled. "Just don't screw it up. Claire doesn't give her heart easily, but when she does, she's all in. If you hurt her, I have 3 older brothers who will make your life very difficult." "Noted. But I'm not going anywhere. She's stuck with me." December brought the completion of the warehouse project. The grand opening was scheduled for mid-month, and David had invited Ethan and Claire as guests of honor. Walking through the finished building, seeing the original brick walls restored and highlighted, the old timber beams preserved and reinforced, the modern safety systems seamlessly integrated into the historic structure, filled Ethan with a pride he hadn't known was possible. This building existed because of choices he'd made, problems he'd solved, vision he'd brought to the project. "You did good work here," David said, shaking Ethan's hand at the opening reception. "Really good work. I've got 2 more properties I want to discuss with you after the holidays. Similar concept, adaptive reuse, preserving character while meeting modern needs. You interested?" "Absolutely." The affordable housing project was progressing well too, though Rebecca had warned him it would extend into the following year. 4 buildings, 100 units of housing for families who'd been priced out of San Francisco's insane market. Every time Ethan visited the site, he thought about his own housing struggles, about the years in that cramped Tenderloin apartment, about families like his who deserved better. This project wasn't just professional achievement, it was personal redemption, proof that his work could actually matter. Noah's winter concert at school fell on a Tuesday evening, and both Ethan and Claire attended, sitting in uncomfortable auditorium seats watching 3rd graders sing slightly off-key holiday songs. Noah spotted them in the crowd and waved enthusiastically, his smile so bright it made Ethan's chest ache. "He's happy," Claire whispered, taking Ethan's hand. "Really, genuinely happy. Because of you. You've given him stability, family, things I couldn't provide on my own." "You were providing them, Ethan. You just had help. That's not weakness. That's what family is supposed to be." After the concert, they took Noah out for hot chocolate, a tradition that had developed over the past months. Noah chattered excitedly about the concert, about his friends, about the robot he was designing for his 4th grade science project next year. He was so different from the quiet, worried child he'd been a year ago, more confident, more open, willing to dream bigger. "Can I ask you guys something?" Noah said suddenly, his expression turning serious. "Of course, buddy," Ethan replied. "Are you going to get married?" The question hung in the air. Ethan and Claire exchanged glances, both caught off guard. "Why do you ask?" Claire said gently. "Because my friend Emma's dad got remarried, and she was really worried about it, but then it turned out okay. And I think it would be okay if you guys got married. More than okay. Good, actually." Ethan felt his heart hammering. They hadn't talked about marriage explicitly, had been content to let the relationship develop naturally without pressure or timelines. But hearing his son ask about it directly forced the question into the open. "Would that be something you'd want?" Ethan asked carefully. "Claire becoming your stepmom officially?" Noah nodded immediately. "Yeah, because she's already kind of like my mom anyway. She helps with homework and makes my lunch and comes to my concerts. She just doesn't have the official title." Claire's eyes were bright with tears she was clearly trying to hold back. "That's about the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me, Noah." "So is that a yes? You're going to get married?" Ethan laughed, the tension breaking. "How about we talk about it, buddy? Your dad has to actually ask Claire first, you know. There's a whole process." "Well, hurry up. Emma said the wedding cake is the best part." That night, after Noah was asleep, Ethan and Claire sat on the back porch despite the December chill, wrapped in blankets, talking about the conversation. "I don't want you to feel pressured," Ethan said. "Just because Noah asked doesn't mean we have to rush into anything." "I don't feel rushed. I feel ready." Claire looked at him seriously. I love you, Ethan. I love Noah. I love the life we've built together. If you're asking whether I'd say yes if you proposed, the answer is yes. But only if you actually want to get married, not because your 8-year-old thinks wedding cake is a good enough reason. I want to marry you, Ethan said, the words coming easier than he expected. I've wanted to for a while now. I just didn't know if it was too soon, if you were ready for that level of commitment. How long have we known each other? 14 months, give or take. 14 months since you saved my life, since we met in literally the most dramatic way possible. I think we're past too soon, don't you? Ethan laughed. Fair point. So we're doing this? We're really doing this? I think we are. But Ethan, you should actually propose. Properly. Not just decide on the back porch at midnight because our son asked us about it. You want the whole thing? Ring, romantic moment, the works? I want you to do whatever feels right to you. Surprise me. Planning a proposal while living with the person you're planning to propose to turned out to be more complicated than Ethan anticipated. He couldn't exactly shop for rings with Claire around, couldn't plan elaborate surprises when they shared a calendar in a house. He enlisted Noah as a co-conspirator, and his son took the role with utmost seriousness. You should propose at the place where you first met, Noah suggested. In the movies, people always go back to important places. That was a collapsed building in the middle of an earthquake zone, buddy. Not exactly romantic. Oh, right. Then how about somewhere with the ocean? Girls like the ocean. Ethan did his ring shopping during lunch breaks, feeling completely out of his depth in jewelry stores where everything seemed either too elaborate or too plain. He finally found one that felt right. A simple platinum band with a small diamond, elegant without being ostentatious. The jeweler asked when the wedding would be, and Ethan realized he hadn't thought that far ahead. Soon, he said. Probably soon. He decided on Christmas Eve for the proposal. They'd developed a tradition over the past months, walking through the neighborhood to look at lights after Noah went to bed, just the two of them enjoying the quiet and each other's company. It felt right, intimate and private rather than grand and public. Christmas Eve arrived with unusual clarity, the city lights sharp against a dark sky.